Chapter 23-29. Shut up. The team leader berates. You only need to comprehend your own technique, where the other matters for you to worry about. Yes, this subordinate understands. Suhu is still unwilling to give up. He looks over and uses his spirit sense to scan the area. There really isn't a single trace of magic power, nor is there any trace of him. You go sit down and continue comprehending. The team leader looks around and berates. All of you hurry up and work hard. The general said that after the Dao sect cultivators come, we won't be able to stay peaceful for long. We must familiarize ourselves with the array before the sword cultivators come. This matter is crucial. Whoever dares to delay the general's plan, even if I don't say it, all of you should know the consequences, right? Yes, this subordinate understands. When everyone hears, they don't dare to look anymore. Even the disciple who opened his eyes earlier hurriedly sits down and closes his eyes to comprehend. The team leader waves his hand and directs a dozen disciples who are also in the middle stage of foundation establishment to fly into the air and surround Xiao Hua's hiding spot. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua has already flown away. How can they find him? Following which, the dozen disciples searched the entire space once again, but still couldn't find any trace of him. They can't help but hesitate. A cultivator says worriedly, "Team leader, this matter is a little difficult. If we report this to the general, he will definitely be furious. We actually allowed the Dao sect cultivators to find this place. But if we don't report this, and there really is such a person here, I'm afraid it will cause trouble. Actually, from what this old man sees, there isn't anyone here." The team leader thinks for a moment and smiles. The ordinary invisibility talisman can't use magic power. If someone is flying in the air, he will definitely reveal himself. Furthermore, this place is within the mind. Even the 5 elements escape technique can't penetrate deep. Team leader means? We don't need to report? Of course we need to report. The team leader smiles. If we don't report, how will the general know of our hard work? How will he know that our vigilance is high? Yes, this subordinate understands. The disciple suddenly realizes, this subordinate will go over now. You stay here and comprehend. This old man will personally go over. Yes. The disciple's eyes reveal a trace of disappointment. He follows the other dozen people to their seats and sits down while the team leader flies out. After Xiao Hua concealed his tracks, he directly walked over the heads of these Jin Quan mountain disciples. These middle-stage foundation establishment disciples didn't notice at all. I'm overjoyed. Xiao Hua was still remorseful as he flew. Needless to say, this must be the top-grade spirit stone crystal pillar that Zhenming Hui was talking about. That Golden Spring Mountain disciple was right. Other than the array formation in the guest hall, there should be 9 more in the other places. This is one of them. I was wondering where all the patrolling disciples of Golden Spring Mountain had gone to. So they were all hiding within the array. And Tu Hong's plan is really well thought out. He wants the disciples of Jinshan Quan to control the main part of the array and the Dao sect disciples to control the unimportant parts. He wants my Dao sect disciples to work for him. That's why I'm looking for spirit stone veins. I can't waste my magic power for nothing. Xiao Hua knew that the disciples in the formation would definitely search for it, and they would definitely report it to Tu Hong. Therefore, he didn't dare to be negligent and continue to search along the tunnel. When he found an abandoned mine next to the array formation, Xiao Hua scratched his head. Fuck, are you kidding me? Don't tell me that all the spirit stone veins in Jinshan Quan Mountain have already been emptied by Sky Patrol City? Why didn't they leave anything for me? Following which, Xiao Hua turned around hatefully and was about to escape back. But just as he turned around, Xiao Hua still wasn't satisfied. With a wave of his hand, he took out the spirit-seeking mouse and scolded. Little Silver, your mother isn't here. I'm your mother's mother. Why can't you understand what I'm saying? Quickly go and find the spirit stone veins. Otherwise I won't let you eat any more spirit herbs. Then, Xiao Hua glared fiercely at Little Silver, not caring whether it understood or not. It was strange. At this moment, Little Silver was different from Imperial Thunder Sect's Myriad Thunder Valley's Little Silver. As soon as this guy was released from the space, it immediately raised its nose and sniffed around. After a while, its eyes immediately lit up, and just like the crystal pillar of the supreme-grade spirit stone that Xiaohua had seen earlier, it burrowed into the ground beside Xiaohua. Xiaohua was overjoyed. Without saying a word, he made a hand seal and followed it. The spirit-seeking mouse was indeed a spirit-seeking mouse. It was completely different from Xiaohua's blindness. It had a purpose. It directly burrowed into the ground without any hesitation. Xiaohua used Earth Escape to follow it. He clearly felt that the pressure underground was different from before. Not only was there an extremely heavy force pressing down on his head, faintly imprisoning all the vital essence in his body, but there was also a strong force pushing him out. Moreover, this layer of soil was extremely fine, and it was very difficult to escape through the ground. He had to consume a lot of vital essence for every foot he traveled. Fortunately, Xiaohua's vital essence was extremely strong, and he didn't show any signs of exhaustion even after diving down several hundred zhong with the spirit-seeking mouse. However, the force pushing him up was even stronger, and Xiaohua gradually found it a little strenuous. Moreover, a lot of time had passed, and Xiaohua was ready to beat a retreat. But just as Xiaohua was about to call out to the spirit-seeking mouse, his eyes instinctively lit up. The spirit-seeking mouse stopped and very happily pounced forward. My goodness, this is... Xiaohua also stopped, his eyes wide as he stared at the crystal that was several hundred zhong tall in front of him. He couldn't help sucking in a breath of cold air, and some liquid flowed in his mouth. Xiaohua stretched out his hand and touched the ice-cold crystal. His divine sense swept over it, and he couldn't help groaning again. Damn it, I'm rich. This doesn't seem to be a supreme-grade spirit stone. This should be chalcedony. It's an extremely rare chalcedony found in spirit stone veins. Thinking this, Xiaohua no longer hesitated. He stretched out his hand and took out Qiu-Yin-Liu. Gathering all the strength in his body, he stabbed at the chalcedony spike. With a muffled clang, the sharp demonic weapon, coupled with his incomparable strength, actually pierced a small part of Xiaohua's Qiu-Yin-Liu into the spike. I'm a little too excited. Xiaohua used all his strength to pry open the Qiu-Yin-Liu, but the chalcedony didn't budge at all. Xiaohua couldn't help but smile bitterly. As long as he used all his strength to pull the Qiu-Yin-Liu out, he would use less strength. Then, Xiaohua would pry left and right, prying out several pieces of chalcedony in succession. After putting the chalcedony into his space, Xiaohua didn't dare to stop. With a wave of his hand, he put Little Silver, who was pouncing on the chalcedony, into his space. Completely ignoring the hidden bitterness in Little Silver's eyes, he immediately rushed back to the surface. When Xiaohua returned to the tunnel following the divine sense mark, he saw a pair of anxious bright eyes looking around. Chapter 23:30. Oh, what's wrong? Xiaohua turned around the cave and asked with a smile. Xiaohua, where did you go? Seeing Xiaohua appear, Ming Mao was pleasantly surprised. She immediately pounced over, hurriedly and naturally holding Xiaohua's hand as she said anxiously, I didn't go anywhere. I'm just watching from the side. Xiaohua also pulled his hand out without leaving a trace and pointed behind him. Then why did you take so long? Captain Chui's communication talisman has been here for a long time, urging us to hurry back. Ming Mao approached. Her voice seemed to be bitter. Moreover, your communication talisman can't be sent out. How can this concubine not be anxious? Oh, my communication talisman can't be sent out? Xiaohua was slightly stunned, but fortunately, the communication talisman can't be sent out. Otherwise, if he was in the array, wouldn't he be exposed? That's right, where did you go? Ming Mao rebuked. Xiaohua shrugged and smiled. This little brother is indeed nearby. The reason why the communication talisman can't be sent out is because this is a spirit stone mine, right? What does this have to do with a spirit stone mine? Ming Mao asked curiously. Let's hurry up and leave. Xiaohua smiled and flew up. Didn't senior sister say that Shui Hongshen sent a communication talisman? He, Chui Hongshan is your senior brother. Why are you still calling him that? Ming Mao asked with a smile. Xiao Hua's brows twitched, but he didn't reply. Ming Mao blinked her eyes, knowing that Xiao Hua wasn't willing to talk about it, so she didn't ask anymore. The two of them flew back from their patrol area. Just as they flew back to their resting area, they saw that in front of the quiet room, there were disciples from various sects standing there with displeasure on their faces. What took you so long? Chui Hongshan reproached again. Ming Mao hurriedly said, Captain Chui, this concubine received your communication talisman and hurried back. But because it was the first time I was on patrol, I flew slowly and just happened to be at the farthest place. Unfortunately, Jin Shan Quan's disciples haven't come yet. Chui Hongshan muttered and didn't ask anymore. What's going on? Ming Mao asked curiously. Junior brother Xiao and I were just patrolling the area. According to the disciple of Golden Spring Mountain, he vaguely mentioned that there seems to be a problem with one of the patrolling guards in Lian country. Chui Hongshan frowned slightly. Xiao Hua rolled his eyes. The place he went to was really far away from the place where the Imperial Thunder sect was patrolling. As for where he went, he really didn't know. He didn't even know which sect helped him take the blame. However, with him, the main culprit here, that sect would not suffer any losses. Sure enough, after another cup of tea's worth of time, Lan Xian personally arrived. As she looked at the many disciples gathered in front of the quiet room, Lan Xian smiled and cupped her hands across her chest. Fellow Taoists, I've disturbed you all. That was a false alarm. I'm really sorry. What's going on, fellow Taoist Lan? One of the captains asked in a displeased manner. It's nothing. Lan Xin didn't hide anything and said, I found traces of an enemy in one of the array cores of my Golden Spring Mountain array. But my Golden Spring Mountain disciples didn't find any sword cultivators that entered. So this old man thought that it might have been a fellow Taoist that came as reinforcements that mistakenly entered the array core. Of course, the fellow Taoists from Lian country's Variant Beast sect were also patrolling at that time. The disciples of the other nearby sects also didn't go to the array core. So this old man thought that my Golden Spring Mountain disciples had made a mistake. That disciple was severely punished just now. Oh, so that's how it is. The captain nodded. This matter is truly important. It's normal for fellow Taoist Lan to be cautious. If fellow Taoists can understand this old man's difficulties, then that is for the best. Lan Xian cupped her hands across her chest and said, Fellow Taoists, when patrolling, it is best that you follow the predetermined area and do not overstep it. Also, because my Golden Spring Mountain collects spirit stones, there are many underground caves that are similar to a maze. If some fellow Taoists are curious and go in the wrong direction, they really might not be able to return. Remember this, remember this. Then, Lan Xian bid everyone farewell and left. Chui Hongshan looked at Xiao Hua and the others, but didn't say anything. In his heart, he faintly felt that there was something strange about Xiao Hua and Ming Mao coming back so late, but he also didn't ask anything. In the next few days, although Xiao Hua restrained himself a bit, he still found time to directly take Little Silver underground and crazily mine for jade marrow. It was just that this jade marrow was really hard. At first, it was fine, but later, Xiao Hua directly took out the wishful iron rod and used it to cut off a small piece. Just as Xiao Hua was overjoyed, in the vicinity of the Spirit Stone Mine at Golden Spring Mountain, a dozen sword cultivators came. The sword cultivator in front of them was none other than Ling Yunwu of the High Wind Sword sect. Ling Yunwu's eyebrows were tightly furrowed. The flying sword under his feet slowly flew as he swept out with his divine sense, slowly searching. Poor Ling Yunwu. The first time he came to White Jade Mountain, he couldn't find any clues at all. When he came the second time, he relied on a secret technique to find some clues and found the place where the dozens of bright swordsmen he trusted had been killed. Even if he found it, what was the use? Ling Yunwu still didn't have the slightest clue. This place is very far away from Sky Patrol City. Furthermore, it's barren. Which Golden Core cultivator would come here? Or hundreds of Foundation establishment cultivators to completely surround my swordsmen? The cultivators of Sky Patrol City were forced by LV Ruochang's plan to guard the Spirit Stone mine. Then there must be hundreds of Foundation establishment cultivators coming to reinforce White Jade Mountain. If they were just passing by, it's impossible for there to be hundreds of them. Only a few or a dozen. Only in the vicinity of White Jade Mountain can they gather together. But where's this Spirit Stone mine? It's not like I haven't been here before, but I've never found any signs of Spirit Stone mine. Ling Yunwu was really going crazy. He also had a mission to attack the Spirit Stone mine, but it wasn't near White Jade Mountain. Furthermore, compared with attacking the Spirit Stone mine, his mission was more important. That was Dark Silk Wood, which LV Ruochang had obtained by chance in Million Mountain Ming. Now that he needed it, where's he going to find another piece? Moreover, there was also the sword pouch, which was also a very precious thing. He had lost it just like that. He felt ashamed just thinking about it. He was really too careless. After flying for half a day, Ling Yunwu arrived at the mountain range of Spring Gold Mountain. Ling Yunwu sighed and landed on the mountain range. The disciples scattered around him also flew over. Everyone's face was full of embarrassment. Obviously, they didn't find anything. Senior Brother Ling, a disciple who was also an illusory sword cultivator, said softly, "Those Foundation establishment cultivators. I'm afraid they've already returned to Sky Patrol City. The possibility of success is extremely small if we search inch by inch." "Sigh, that's strange." Ling Yunwu sat on a huge rock in a mountain range and smiled bitterly. LV Ruochang sent a flying sword message saying that she couldn't find the sword pouch's trace even with her secret technique. That sword pouch was either imprisoned by a powerful magic power, or was too far away from the sword region. Maybe, I've guessed wrong. Is there really a late-stage golden core or a nascent soul cultivator? This nascent soul cultivator wouldn't attack a drawing sword disciple, right? At most, it would be a golden core cultivator. The disciple said softly. "Sigh, maybe." Ling Yunwu didn't comment. The most important thing now is to find the black silk wood. Otherwise, the Beast Cultivator Senior's life will be lost. I won't have the face to see anyone. I've been here before, but I haven't seen any spirit stone veins. The disciple looked at the endless pine trees and shook his head. We can't find it, but it doesn't mean it's not here. Maybe it's under the forest?" Ling Yunwu snorted and waved his hand. The flying sword flew out like a raging fire. Boom, boom, boom. It destroyed all the trees in a radius of hundreds of feet under the mountain range. For a moment, flames soared into the sky. Looking at the crackling flames burning and slowly extinguishing, the charred trees fell to the snow-covered ground. A bitter smile appeared on the disciple's face. He bowed and said, "Why don't I bring the disciples to the forest to have a look?" Go. Ling Yunwu nodded. "Find more places." "Yes." The disciple accepted the order and left. Following which, boom, 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 sounds came from the forest. Trees began to fall to the ground. Sigh, it feels like searching for a needle in a haystack. Although the Ling Feng Sword Sect's disciples moved quickly, the area they searched was still pathetically small compared to the entire forest. Who knew how long it would take for them to search through the entire forest? Sigh. Ling Yunwu sighed softly again. He felt a faint sense of regret. He knew that everything had already happened and regret wouldn't solve anything. However, he couldn't help but think, of course, this wouldn't have happened, right? After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, Ling Yunwu seemed to have rested enough. He flew up and stepped on his flying sword. He charged into the sky and flew towards the other side of the Golden Spring Mountain. However, just as he flew for 100 feet, another sword light came from the northeast. This sword light was as blue as water and incomparably clear. Oh, when Ling Yunwu saw this sword light, a smile appeared on his face. He covered up all the dejection he felt earlier. With a push, the fiery red sword light under his feet flew forward to meet the incoming sword light. When the sword light flew closer, a beautiful middle-aged woman could be seen on the flying sword. She was dressed in the standard sword cultivator attire. She had big eyes, a towering chest, and snow-white skin that was very eye-catching. "Husband," the female swordsman shouted when she saw Ling Yunwu. "Oh, Warner, why aren't you on duty in Swordsgate? What are you doing here?" Ling Yunwu smiled and stretched out his hand as if he was going to catch the female swordsman. This female swordsman was Ling Yunwu's wife, Yuan. Yuan's face was full of smiles. Before she flew to Ling Yunwu's side, she couldn't wait to take out a sword scroll and shouted, "Husband, I have good news to tell you." Chapter 23:31. "Oh, what good news?" Ling Yunwu raised his other hand and took the sword scroll that Yuan handed over. However, that hand held Yuan's soft hand. "Hee, husband will know once you take a look." Yuan was actually a little out of breath, and her face was even a little red. It was really a symptom of forcefully activating the sword origin and flying on the sword. Ling Yunwu's heart ached, but he was not in a hurry to check the sword scroll. He said with pity, "If there's any news, can't you just send a flying sword message? Why do you have to come here yourself? Not to mention the sword origin, this journey will not be safe. If we meet a cultivator from the Dao sect, your husband, husband, just take a look first." Yuan did not wait for him to finish and laughed. "How can a flying sword message be safer and more convenient than me coming here myself? Besides, I'm also worried about you. If I don't come and see for myself, how can I be at ease?" Hearing Yuan's words, Ling Yunwu felt sweet in his heart. He released his spirit sense to check the sword scroll. "This is an image." Yuan smiled as she reminded him, but her eyes revealed a trace of mischief. "Warner, how old are you? You're still so naughty." Ling Yunwu smiled bitterly, and the gloominess in his heart faded a lot. When he activated the sword origin, he saw a blurry image appear from the sword scroll. It was a thin and tall Dao sect cultivator wearing the attire of the Imperial Thunder sect. He quickly flew over, and before he could see the cultivator's appearance clearly, the image turned black again. A trace of surprise flashed across Ling Yunwu's eyes, and then he looked at Yuan in surprise. "This is the image left behind by Old Seven and the others." "Yes, not all of them," Yuan said with a smile. "They were killed in a hurry, so how could they have the time to leave behind an image? This image was obtained by me, using a secret technique." "Warner," Ling Yunwu's heart ached. He reached out and pulled Yuan into his embrace. He said in a low voice, "It's all my fault. My negligence not only affected my sword cultivation plan, but also caused your cultivation to be greatly damaged." It's nothing." Yuan forced a smile like a blue flower and comforted Ling Yunwu. "To be able to do something for my husband, I'm willing to pay any price. Anwar is really my good wife." Ling Yunwu increased the strength in his hands, as if he wanted to embed Yuan into his body. Yuan gritted her teeth as if she was in pain, but she didn't say anything. The two of them hugged each other for a moment before Yuan said in a low voice, "Husband, we're already an old married couple. Don't be so intimate. If the disciples see this, I'm afraid it won't be good. You are my wife. Who dares to say anything?" Ling Yunwu snorted, but, looking at the sword cultivator disciples who were patrolling the forest at the top of Jinquan Mountain, he still loosened his grip and pulled her hand to fly towards those disciples. "Husband, this image, this concubine has also seen it." Yuan looked at Ling Yunwu and said worriedly, "This golden core cultivator from the Imperial Thunder sect is very powerful. What he used should be the Thunder Control sect's lightning evasion technique. According to the legends, this was the fastest flying technique in the Daybreak continent. My advantage as a sword cultivator was completely gone in front of him. Moreover, you also saw that when he dealt with Old Seven, he didn't use any spells at all and just used close combat." "That's right, this husband also saw it." Ling Yunwu sighed. "This Imperial Thunder sect's cultivator's magic power is so much higher than Old Seven's that he's not afraid of his flying sword at all, or his close combat is even more powerful than us sword cultivators. And it should be the former." Yuan pursed her lips and nodded. "Along the way, this concubine has also been thinking. There are not many people who are stronger than us sword cultivators in close combat. Since this Imperial Thunder Sex cultivator has mastered the lightning evasion technique, he must be a golden core cultivator. The only explanation is that his magic power is profound. Following which, she looked at Ling Yunwu worriedly and said in a low voice, "It's not that this concubine is looking up to him, but the Imperial Thunder Sex flying technique is the nemesis of us sword cultivators." Suddenly, this golden core cultivator got close to us. "Husband, you have to be careful." My wife is thinking too much," Ling Yunwu said proudly. "Even if it's a golden core cultivator from the Imperial Thunder Sect, how can this husband be afraid of him? Although he can fly faster than this husband, once he gets close to us, how can he be a match for this husband? You have to know the difference between a bright sword swordsman and an illusory sword swordsman." Hearing Ling Yunwu's words, as expected, Yuan sighed in her heart. However, she smiled and said, "This concubine naturally knows. This concubine's husband is a strange man in the sword domain. How can a small golden core cultivator from the Imperial Thunder Sect be compared to him?" "You have a sweet mouth." Ling Yunwu's heart skipped a beat. He stretched out his finger and gently stroked Yuan's face. He smiled and said, "This husband understands your thoughts. This husband will definitely be careful when he sees this guy." Yuan sweetly rubbed her face against Ling Yunwu's hand. She was very attached to it. However, at this moment, the two of them had already flown close to the forest of Mount Quanjin. "All of you stop." Ling Yunwu looked at the destroyed trees under his feet and shouted, "Our expectations might be wrong." Yes. When the sword cultivator disciples heard this, they hurriedly flew into the air. After greeting Yuan, Ling Yunwu showed them the image in the sword scroll and said, "I reckon that the one who killed our soaring wind sword sect is a golden core cultivator from the Imperial Thunder Sect. If I'm not wrong, he should be passing by here and heading to Sky Patrol City. He won't stop here. We have to think of another way." Imperial Thunder Sect cultivator? Tall and thin figure? A soaring wind sword sect's bright sword sect disciple suddenly lost his voice and said, "Martial Uncle Ling, this can't be the Imperial Thunder Sect cultivator called Terrifying Phoenix, right?" "Terrifying Phoenix?" Yuan frowned and whispered, "What kind of cultivator is that? Could it be related to this golden core cultivator?" No, Ling Yunwu stared at that disciple and hurriedly laughed. "That's just a Foundation establishment disciple with the Phoenix bloodline. He's not the same person as this golden core cultivator. This concubine knows." Yuan smiled and said, "This concubine just doesn't know what's going on with this terrifying phoenix. This person has nothing to do with us. My wife, you don't have to care about who he is." Ling Yunwu said with a smile, "My wife has already sent the sword slip over. It's better to go back as soon as possible. Dao Sect cultivators can appear at any time. It's quite dangerous." Then he turned and ordered, "Yunfei, send your senior sister back." "Yes, senior brother Ling." The swordsman, who was also an illusory sword cultivator, cupped his hands and answered, "Husband, you have to be careful." Yuan was very obedient. She didn't ask who the Phoenix Man was anymore and said, "Why don't you ask fifth senior brother and the others to come over and help you?" Ling Yunwu originally wanted to refuse, but after thinking about it, he nodded and said, "That's good too. Yunfei, go back to the sword sect and tell the sword master about this. Or ask the senior brothers in the sect to help, or ask other sword friends who are close to you. In short, find about 10 illusory swordsmen. Only with so many sword friends working together will this golden core cultivator of the Imperial Thunder Sect not be able to escape." Chapter 23:32. Yuan was overjoyed when she saw that Ling Yunwu had listened to her suggestion. She reluctantly parted with Ling Yunwu, and a blue flying sword appeared under her feet and flew into the distance. Don't ever mention the horrifying phoenix again. After Yuan flew far away, Ling Yunwu coldly glared at the disciple and said, "Fortunately, this is your martial uncle. If it was someone else who wanted to get to the bottom of the matter, how would you answer? Do you want thousands of swordsmen to suffer the wrath of Senior Huajian?" "Yes, I know my mistake." The disciple who drew the sword immediately understood the crux of the matter and hurriedly replied with a bow. However, what you said is not without reason. Ling Yunwu squinted his eyes and looked in the direction of Sky Patrol City. Although the possibility is very small, if it's true, then the disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect are really interesting. Let's go. Ling Yunwu thought for a while and waved his hand. He led the disciples across the mountain range of Golden Spring Mountain and flew in the direction of Sky Patrol City. However, they had just flown for a few miles when they were greeted by a dozen bird cultivators. Each bird cultivator was dragging a small dwarf on their back. Ling Yunwu did not dare to delay. He stopped in midair and cupped his hands. Ling Yunwu of the Soaring Wind Sword Sect greets Sword Friend Fei Yu. The bird cultivators stopped in midair. The one in front flapped his wings and glanced sharply at Ling Yunwu. He said coldly, "Soaring Wind Sword Sect? Your attack area doesn't seem to be here, right?" Hee, Sword Friend Fei Yu. I'll let you know that I've lost something, and I need to find it nearby. What is it? It's not a good thing to let you know about it, Ling Yunwu said with a smile. Senior Qi and the others should know about it. Yes. The bird cultivator nodded slightly. I'm Ing Chao of the Quilted Mountain Sect. I'm looking for a cultivator here. Can I help you? Oh, are there any cultivators from the Taoist sect hiding here? Ling Yunwu asked curiously. I've been searching here for several days, but I didn't find any clues. This old man flew past this place earlier, but I don't know any Tao sect cultivators. Ing Chao nodded and said, but a few days ago, not far from here, my Flying Feather Sect's fellow disciples and the Giants encountered dozens of Tao Sect's Foundation establishment cultivators in a row. Just as they were about to kill these cultivators, the Giants sent over another dozen cultivators. One of the tall and thin Foundation establishment cultivators killed 3 of my Flying Feather Sect's fellow disciples and even scared the Giants away. He scared the Giant away? Ling Yunwu asked curiously. Is this Foundation establishment cultivator very powerful? What fellow Taoist Ling doesn't know is that the cultivator used a long staff to bend a giant's mace and send the giant into the ground. His strength is frightening. The giants tremble with fear and don't dare to continue fighting. A strange expression appeared on Ing Chao's face. Hiss! Ling Yunwu sucked in a breath of cold air. Suddenly, he realized something and hurriedly said, a tall and thin cultivator? Are you a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect? This old man doesn't know. Ing Chao shook his head slightly, then turned his head and asked, do you know? The closest bird cultivator was the one who was chased away by Xiaohua. He also shook his head and said, this subordinate can't tell if he's a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect. Ling Yunwu thought for a moment, then took out the sword slip and played the image. It's him. Although the bird cultivator couldn't see Xiaohua's appearance, Xiaohua's ghost-like flying speed, his tall and thin figure, and the Imperial Thunder Sect's Taoist robe frightened the bird cultivator. His wings trembled nonstop, and the dwarf on his back almost fell from the sky. Idiot! Ing Chao cursed, then looked at Ling Yunwu and asked, fellow Taoist Ling is also looking for this person. That's right. Ling Yunwu clenched his teeth. It's him. It seems that I didn't find the wrong person this time. Good, since that's the case. Ing Chao nodded and said, then this old man will lend you a hand. Fellow Taoist Fei Yu knows where this person is? Ling Yunwu couldn't believe it. Hee. Ing Chao shook his wings and said with a smile, although this old man doesn't know, the little friend on my back knows. Fellow Taoist Unicave knows? Ling Yunwu was puzzled and looked at the dwarf on Ing Chao's back. That's right, this old man knows. The dwarf proudly raised his neck and explained what he found, then added, this old man and the others found traces of Taoist sect cultivators here, so they shouldn't be far from here. Good. Ling Yunwu was so excited that he wanted to clap his hands. This Ling thanks fellow Taoist Unicave. Haha, you're welcome, you're welcome. The dwarf was very happy, and his facial features were squeezed together, as if being recognized by an illusory sword sect cultivator was an extremely amazing thing. This old man and the others are just scouts. Ing Chao smiled coldly and said, if this old man's guess is correct, This should be a secret place for Taoist sect cultivators, and it should be the spirit stone vein we're looking for. Behind this old man, there are thousands of sword cultivators waiting. As long as we confirm it, they will immediately come. At that time, not only will we be able to find fellow Taoist Ling's things, we can even divide the large amount of spirit stones. Good. That's exactly what I want. Ling Yunwu laughed and said, Then what are we hesitating for? Let's go. Good. Straightforward. Ing Chao shook his wings, and a trace of a smile flashed in his eyes. His body flew up again, and he carried the dwarf and flew towards the mountain range of Quanjin Mountain. At this time, there was already some snow on Quanjin Mountain, and palm-sized snowflakes fell from the clouds. Moreover, the thick layers of clouds were stacked in the air above Quanjin Mountain, as if a waterfall was pouring down from the sky, and it was even more spectacular. Jie! Ing Chao cried out a few times. More than 10 bird cultivators rushed up the tall Golden Spring mountain range. They ascended in a straight line and gradually approached the cumulus clouds. Whoa! An intense wind whistling sound was emitted from Ing Chao's body, following which more than 10 bird cultivators actually crashed into the clouds. In an instant, more than 10 huge holes were opened up in the dark clouds. The dark clouds sprinkled on their bodies, and their feathers were blown up one by one. The dwarves on their backs were already frightened out of their wits, and each of them hugged onto the backs of the bird cultivators and shrunk their heads deep into their chests, not even daring to look. Looking at their situation, compared to the high spirits of the bird cultivators, it was like the difference between heaven and earth. Ling Yunwu naturally would not follow the bird cultivators into the clouds, and he did not understand the actions of these bird cultivators. Just as he was frowning slightly, more than 10 sounds rang out, and more than 10 bird cultivators once again flew out from the clouds and separately flew towards the surroundings of Quanji Mountain. What are these bird cultivators trying to do? A disciple saw Ling Yunwu frowning and also said in agreement, Who doesn't know that they are flying high? I'm afraid they want to see the size of Quanjin Mountain. Assign the scouting positions. Ling Yunwu said indifferently. Let's go, I want to see where Ing Chao is. Ing Chao, with the dwarf on his back, landed in the air several hundred feet away from Ling Yunwu and still maintained that kind of extreme speed. The dwarf on his back really could not bear this kind of stimulation and shouted out loudly. With a loud bang, Ing Chao's wings suddenly spread open, and his whole body immediately became as stable as a falling leaf, slowly floating towards the northeast corner of Quanjin Mountain. When he was only several feet away from the forest of Quanjin Mountain, the dwarf let go of his hand and jumped down from Ing Chao's back. It was obvious that the dwarf's legs were somewhat trembling. When the dwarf landed in the forest, he heard a burst of crackling sounds, and the dwarf in Ling Yunwu's eyes suddenly disappeared. Oh, this dwarf knows the 5 elements escape technique. Ling Yunwu suddenly understood why Ing Chao and the other bird cultivators brought the dwarf over. Just now, the dwarf only said that he found the traces of Xiao Hua and the others, and did not say that he used the earth derivation technique to avoid Xiao Hua's divine sense. So Ling Yunwu was shocked. Flying in front of Ing Chao, Ling Yunwu cupped his hands and said, Sword friend Ing Chao, this dwarf actually knows the 5 elements escape technique? It is this Ling who is ignorant and inexperienced. It's nothing but a thing that hides underground all day long, not daring to see people. At this time, Ing Chao had already returned to his human form. He was a swordsman with a thin figure and sallow skin. His 2 slender eyes flashed with arrogance from time to time. If I did not ask them to help find the traces of cultivators, how could this old man let them sit on my back? Oh, Ling Yunwu suddenly understood why the bird cultivators rushed into the sky just now. This Ling also knows some things about the sword domain since childhood, and now I have cultivated to the illusory sword, but this mysterious dwarf and also this giant, I still do not know much. I wonder if sword friend Fei Yu can enlighten me? Ling Yunwu cupped his hands and asked very modestly. Don't ask me. This old man also does not know. Ing Chao waved his hand disdainfully. It's nothing more than digging holes in the ground. What do you know about them? Then he looked at Ling Yunwu and said with a serious expression, It's not that this old man doesn't want to say. This old man really does not know. If Senior Qi did not call them out, he must know that there are such strange people in my sword domain. Oh, Ling Yunwu was quite disappointed. He looked at the ground and said, The dwarf's 5 elements escape technique is similar to the Taoist sect's magic star. It should be different. Ing Chao shook his head and said, This is the dwarf's earth amplification technique. It is said that the dwarf was born with a remarkable ability. It is similar to the giant's infinite strength. However, the dwarf is really too timid, so it is not good to show. Perhaps. Ling Yunwu's eyes did not leave the forest, as if he wanted to see the dwarf's trace. Ing Chao did not speak, and his figure stood there straight. From afar, he looked very proud and aloof. The dwarf had long been frightened out of his wits. When he swore that he would never sit on the bird cultivator's back again, he saw that the distance to the ground was not high, so he immediately jumped down from Ing Chao's back. Although his figure was small, he still crashed into a tree and even broke a branch. After the dwarf landed on the ground, he did not escape into the depths, but instead hid under the soil layer. He let out a long sigh and stayed in a daze for as long as a meal. Only then did his figure sway and escape into the depths of Golden Spring Mountain. Chapter 23:33. As the dwarf moved downwards, his nose twitched. Sometimes he would move left, sometimes he would move right, sometimes he would dive down, sometimes he would move up, as if there really was a path beneath the earth. The dwarf's earth amplification technique was different from Xiao Hua's earth escape technique. There wasn't any brilliance protecting the dwarf's body. As long as the dwarf moved his hands and feet, his body would move. Everything was the same as a mortal walking on the ground. However, after the dwarf stealthily moved for a long time, his body began to slow down. The dwarf's face wasn't alarmed, but rather happy. This proved that the earth here was different from other places, and this was exactly what he was looking for. Sure enough, after another hour, the earth beneath his feet became incomparably hard. The dwarf was no longer able to move even half a step forward. The dwarf looked left and right. Then he followed the hard earth towards a Golden Spring mountain range. And within the Golden Spring mountain range, in a secluded area within a palace-like cave, Tu Hong and Lan Xian were sitting on 2 chairs with expressionless faces. In front of the chairs was a square mirror that was 10 feet wide, and the mirror was covered in an earthy yellow color. And in this earthy yellow haze, there was a dark red thread that was like a blood red thread that was extremely obvious on the lower half of the mirror. Not too far away from this blood red thread, there were dozens of pitch black dots that were slowly moving towards it. Great General, seeing the dots come closer and closer, Lan Xian couldn't help but be moved. She whispered, This sword cultivator, where did he find such a master? There are actually dozens of them. They actually know the 5-element escape technique. However, Tu Hong didn't seem to hear her. His face was indifferent as he coldly watched those black dots approach the blood-red thread. Seeing Tu Hong not respond, Lan Xian first stopped talking. But after another cup of tea's worth of cultivation, she couldn't help but remind him again, Great General, they're getting closer and closer. I fear they will discover the spells of my Golden Spring mountain range. Old Brother Lan, Tu Hong looked up and sighed. I have reminded you more than once that the path of a general is to first control your heart. Even if a spiritual mountain collapses in front of you, your complexion won't change. Even if an elk rises to the left, your eyes won't blink. Then, you will be able to control the situation and deal with the enemy. If you can't even handle the tricks of a dozen ghastly clowns, how can you improve your cultivation? Alas, Great General, that's easy to say, but difficult to do. Lan Xian sighed. This old woman also knows that there is nothing to fear from these dozens of clowns. But what about behind them? That was over 1,000 sword cultivators. Even if my Golden Spring Mountain disciples are not afraid of them, wouldn't my Golden Spring Mountain Spirit Stone mine be exposed? The great general's foundation was gone soon. Without Quan Jinshan, the great general's position in Sky Patrol City is also in jeopardy. And elder brother Lon was worried about this too, but this too mocked elder brother instead. This too is really unbearable. Tu Hong's expression slightly changed. He stood up and cupped his hands. This too apologizes to elder brother. It's nothing. Lon Xin hurriedly blocked Tu Hong. She smiled and said, this old woman also wants to borrow the strength of the great general to cultivate to the Golden Core realm. This is also for my own sake. Old brother Lon, this too knows what you're thinking. Tu Hong took advantage of the situation to sit down. He pointed his finger and said, actually, what elder brother is thinking is that Golden Spring Mountain's Spirit Stone mine will be discovered by the sword cultivators. You even vaguely mentioned before that the arrival of the disciples from the 3 countries would attract the attention of the sword cultivators and bring a devastating disaster to my Golden Spring Mountain? That's right, this old man did say that. Lon Xi nodded without concealing anything. The Dusk Mansion's conference hall is simply a high and mighty place. They blindly give orders. If they didn't send any disciples here, my Golden Spring Mountain would have concealed it well. Even after 1,000 years, we wouldn't have to worry about being discovered by the sword cultivators. But now, how many days has it been since their reinforcements arrived? The sword cultivators have already chased after us. Tu Hong nodded. He didn't comment. Instead, he asked, did you find that disciple that randomly broke into the Spirit Stone mine? No, there wasn't any trace of him. Lon Xin found it strange that Tu Hong would suddenly ask this. She shook her head and said, also, I didn't see any changes in Golden Spring Mountain spells. I'm afraid that disciple was mistaken. What kind of rumors can there be among the disciples of the 3 countries? Tu Hong suddenly asked. Rumors? Lon Xin was puzzled. She blankly said, no, I didn't hear any rumors. That's good. Tu Hong nodded, a relieved look on his face. He said, my Golden Spring Mountain's array formation is very tight. Since no outsiders have infiltrated, then that means that the unknown figure is a cultivator from within my Golden Spring Mountain. Of course, this is only a guess. Perhaps there isn't. Moreover, there aren't any rumors right now. The sword cultivator's attack is imminent. So who cares if there isn't? Yes, Lon Xin still couldn't make sense of this, so she could only nod. There are many things that I don't want old brother Lon to know. As Tu Hong saw this, he mysteriously smiled and said, as long as I pass through this great sword battle at Golden Spring Mountain, whether or not Golden Spring Mountain is exposed, it will be harmless to me. The Lord City Lord of Sky Patrol City. He will definitely reward me. Lon Xin was stunned. Then, as if she thought of something, she raised her eyebrows and said, so? Tu Hong raised his index finger and placed it on his lips. He smiled and said, there are some things that cannot be said. Who knows if there is another cultivator that we cannot detect next to this cave? Let's wait for this matter to end. Oh, look, the sword cultivators are approaching the barrier. As he said this, Tu Hong pointed his finger at the 4 sides of the mirror. Sure enough, dozens of small dots were approaching the blood threads from all directions. However, just as these small dots were about to approach the blood threads, they all stopped there. Then, they were like ants on a hot pan. After circling around for a moment, they scattered and started to swim around the blood threads. Lon Xion's face showed a trace of relief. But Tu Hong frowned. After a moment, he whispered, the earth layer of this spirit stone mine is very solid. It is what my Golden Spring Mountain's defensive array formation relies on, but it is also a place that is easily discovered. Although these sword cultivators cannot go deep into the earth layer, they should already know that there is something strange below. Then, Tu Hong looked up and said, old brother Lon, go and inform the disciples of the Dawn Array to kill the sword cultivators near them. Lon Xin hesitated for a moment, then cupped her hands and said, this old woman will go now. Not long after Lon Xin walked out, she saw that there weren't any superfluous images on the mirror. Instead, the three small dots that were cruising above the blood-red lines suddenly began to accelerate, as if they had been frightened, and began to flee in all directions. Huh. Seeing the three small dots getting further and further away from the blood threads, Tu Hong was a little surprised, and his face gradually became dignified. When the small dots broke away from the yellow mirror, Tu Hong clapped his hands again, and a misty brilliance emitted from his hands, covering the four sides of the mirror. The mirror began to shrink, and when it had shrunk to the size of a foot, Tu Hong clenched his hand, and a yellow light appeared between his fingers. He tightly grasped the mirror, and, as the yellow light lingered, the mirror transformed into the shape of a three rhombus. Chapter 23:34. Quick! Tu Hong shouted. He pointed his finger once more, and a yellow light shot out from the trirhombus mirror, turning into a rectangular light screen. Dwarves? So they were dwarves. This old man thought they were sword cultivators. On the light screen, the images of three dwarves were reflected. At this time, Lan Xin also hurried in. She anxiously said, "Hi, General, hi, General." But as he saw the light screen projected into the air, he stopped, his eyes flashing with anxiety. Tu Hong didn't bother with Lan Xin. Instead, he urged the mirror to slowly rotate. Gradually, the bird cultivator Ing Chao's face also flashed on the light screen. Ing Chao's complexion was as ugly as Lan Xion's. It seemed that after hearing the dwarf's report, he was unable to make a decision. Ing Chao, who was standing on the light screen, was startled. A sharp light flashed in his eyes as he waved his hand, turning it into an eagle's wing that streaked across the air. Immediately, Tu Hong's light screen turned into a blur, destroying Tu Hong's light screen that was moving towards Ling Yunwu. Tu Hong wasn't surprised. He slapped his hand, hitting the trirhombus mirror. The mirror gradually shrank, turning into a small triangle that fell into his hand. Tu Hong looked up at Lan Xin and smiled. "Old brother Lan, you also saw it?" This old man received a report from a disciple that went out to kill a sword cultivator. As soon as I learned that dwarves had appeared, I immediately came back to report. Lan Xin forced a smile. Dwarves. I don't know how many years it has been since they've appeared in the Huan Nation. There are records of dwarves in Sky Patrol City. Tu Hong didn't seem particularly surprised, but it's not particularly detailed. I didn't look at it carefully. I only know that dwarves are born with the ability to escape through the earth, but I don't know anything else. Hi, General. You should take a good look. Lan Xin knew that it was useless to say more, but she still complained, "Hi, General. You guard Golden Spring Mountain. You should know more about the Huan Nation." If it weren't for the fact that I want to see if there was any secret technique that Yu Meng had, I fear that I wouldn't even know about this. Tu Hong didn't hide his purpose. Since the dwarves have appeared, the underground defensive array of my Golden Spring Mountain, I'm afraid it won't be as optimistic as we thought. Lan Xin thought for a moment, and then said, "Although I don't know whether or not this dwarf can break through this array formation, we still have to take precautions." "Yes, this too naturally knows." Tu Hong nodded, and then his face turned solemn, saying, "Just now, that bird cultivator discovered this too, spying, but I didn't see the face of the sword cultivator beside him. However, it seems that the sword cultivator's cultivation isn't low. He's either a grade 6 brilliant sword or a grade 1 illusory sword. If he's only a grade 1 illusory sword, it'll be troublesome. Will an illusory sword cultivator appear?" Lan Xin frowned as she heard this. "My Dao Sec's Golden Core cultivator hasn't even made a move yet, but the sword cultivator's illusory swordsman." As Lan Xin spoke to her, she stopped. Obviously, she was thinking of Qin Jian. Since Qin Jian, who was at the illusory sword realm, could kill a Dao Sec disciple, it wasn't strange for an illusory swordsman to appear here. "Old brother Lan, arrange for some trusted disciples to bring Yu Meng to a safe place." Tu Hong pondered for a moment and ordered, Lan Xian was stunned. However, he was only stunned for a moment. He bowed and said, "This old man understands." But just as he turned around, he stopped and asked in a low voice, "Also, do you want to send several female disciples of the Tao sect to go with her?" This. Tu Hong hesitated for a moment and then nodded. "Old brother Lan, you can arrange it as you see fit. As long as they don't become suspicious, it's fine." "Haha." I asked General to rest assured. Lan Xian turned and quickly walked away. Looking at Lan Xian's departing figure, Tu Hong had a relieved expression on his face. He whispered to himself, "Yu Ming, as long as you are safe, then this too can rest assured. Just you wait. In a few years, you will be able to restore yourself to how you were before. This too will be able to fulfill the blood oath I made in the past." Not to mention Tu Hong's arrangements at Golden Spring Mountain. Ling Yunwu was anxiously waiting at the top of Golden Spring Mountain. All of a sudden, he saw 3 bird-type cultivators carrying 3 dwarves with pale faces flying over. He immediately flew over and shouted, "Have you found any sword cultivators?" Who would have thought that the 3 dwarves would be so scared that their courage had been broken? Their mouths were tightly shut, not saying a single word. Ling Yunwu had no choice but to follow them and land in front of Ing Chao. Ing Chao smiled and asked, "Don't be afraid, don't be afraid. What did you encounter underground?" Reporting to High Mastering, one of the bird cultivators revealed his human form and cupped his hands across his chest. This disciple heard this dwarf say that he encountered an incomparably hard layer of stone below ground and was unable to go any further. Moreover, as he was looking for a flaw, 2 Tao sect cultivators suddenly appeared and attacked him without saying a single word. "Good." Ing Chao clapped his hands and said, "The hard layer of stone must be where the spirit stone vein is located." Tao sect cultivators also appeared. "Is there any need to say anything?" "Who?" While they were talking, Ing Chao shouted and looked towards the forest. With a wave of his arm, his figure flew up and shouted, "Quickly call out the other dwarves. There's a golden core cultivator in this spirit stone vein. We will talk after we retreat." "Oh, it really is that bastard." Ling Yunwu's face revealed a sinister expression. "Since that bastard is here, I will turn this terrifying phoenix into a dead chicken man." Immediately after, Ling Yunwu also flew up on his sword and went straight into the sky. He waited for the bird cultivators to fly over with the dwarves before flying away with Ing Chao. Naturally, not long after they flew away, the bird cultivators who flew extremely high returned. They circled above the clouds in the sky, constantly monitoring the movements of Jingquan Mountain. Xiaohua, who was regarded as a dead chicken man by Ling Yunwu, was incomparably free and unfettered at this time. Except for the day when he sneaked into the depths of the spirit stone vein, he was a little cautious and did not go again. For the next few days, he casually said a few words to Ming Mao and then left. He secretly escaped into the depths of the spirit stone vein and used the wishful staff to mine for jade essence. Damn it, this young master has never seen so many spirit stones. No, it's jade essence. Damn it, if every day, every moment, how good would it be to mine jade essence like this? Xiao Hua's eyes were shining. The wishful staff in his hand was constantly waving, and every time it was waved, a large or small piece of jade essence would fall. It was immediately absorbed into his space. That jade essence was really a strange thing between heaven and earth. It was incomparably hard, and previously it was perfectly round. Xiao Hua could only use the silver gilded dragon sword to dig out a small piece. Later, he was able to follow the traces of digging and use the wishful staff. Moreover, with each piece of jade essence, Xiao Hua had a very familiar feeling. It seems this young master often did this kind of thing before. Is it possible that this young master is a low-level cultivator who mines spirit stones? Xiao Hua scratched his head. Or is it a spirit stone mine worker? Yes, mining jade essence and reclaiming wasteland were so similar. How could Xiao Hua not feel familiar? And, if possible, after the war, this young master will find an opportunity to go to a spirit stone mine and see if I can mix in as a miner. Not only can I satisfy my cravings, but I can also earn some spirit stones. Unfortunately, just as Xiao Hua was imagining his happy life in the future, a 1,000-mile sound transmitting talisman quietly appeared in front of his eyes. Oh, what happened to Ming Mao? Which little bastard actually dared to provoke our Imperial Thunder Sect's disciple, and even hindered this young master's wealth? It would be strange if this young master didn't beat you until you were crippled. Xiao Hua was angry. When he gave Ming Mao the sound-transmitting talisman, he said that unless it was a last resort, she must not look for him. However, when Xiao Hua flew back and saw Ming Mao standing there peacefully without any other cultivators beside her, he couldn't help but frown. Senior Sister Ming Mao, did someone disturb you? Where is he? Junior brother Xiao. Are you that concerned about your senior sister? Ming Mao said with a smile. Did you immediately stop cultivating and fly over to protect senior sister as soon as you received the sound-transmitting talisman? Xiao Hua was speechless when he saw how narcissistic Ming Mao was, even saying that she had secretly gone out to cultivate. After thinking for a while, he said with a smile, "This little brother has a secret technique to familiarize himself with. But since senior sister Ming Mao has something to do, this little brother can't not come. Actually, if you really have a secret technique to cultivate, you could just tell Captain Shui. He will definitely cultivate with you, and won't need to be on guard duty," Ming Mao said with a smile. "Tell him?" Xiao Hua curled his lips. "I'm lazy. Don't you know?" I know you're lazy." "Can I tell him?" Ming Mao felt very good about herself. "You can't let your face affect your cultivation, right?" "No need." Hearing Ming Mao speak so intimately with him, Xiao Hua's intuition told him that Fairy Hongxia's fingernails and Xue Xue's teeth had appeared behind him. He hurriedly waved his hand and said, "Senior sister, why did you suddenly send me a message?" "Can't I send a message if there's nothing?" Ming Mao asked back. "Shouldn't you be on guard duty with this concubine?" Senior sister is joking. Hurry up and say it. This little brother's secret technique is still lacking." Xiao Hua saw Ming Mao take a step forward and immediately retreated 2 steps back and said with a smile. Ming Mao pouted and said unhappily, "It's nothing much. It's just that Captain Shui's message talisman asked us to return." "Oh, it seems like they haven't finished patrolling yet." Xiao Hua looked around and said curiously, "Could it be that something happened? Who knows? The message talisman didn't say anything." Ming Mao also shook her head blankly. However, when they returned to the quiet room and heard Chui Hongshin's explanation, Xiao Hua was stunned. "What? They want to send a few female cultivators to escort a very important item back to Sky Patrol City? Are you kidding me? Not to mention that there are many female cultivators in Quanjin Mountain. Why did they choose 3 female disciples from my Imperial Thunder Sect? Furthermore, didn't they want to conceal the information about Quanjin Mountain Spirit Stone Mine? If we escort the item out now, wouldn't it increase the chances of being exposed? Why? You can't bear to let senior sister Ming Mao go out?" Dui Qiming saw that Xiao Hua was puzzled and asked so many questions in a row and chuckled. Xiao Hua was speechless. He waved his hand and said, "I don't have any opinion. I just feel that it's a little strange. It doesn't matter if it's strange or not." Chui Hongshan ignored Xiao Hua's strangeness and waved his hand. "This is a good thing for my Imperial Thunder Sect." Chapter 23:35. And Xiao Hua naturally understood that once the 3 female cultivators left the Quanjin Mountain, they would naturally escape from the Quanjin Mountain. Even if the sword cultivator discovered the Quanjin Mountain's spirit stone mine, they would not be in any danger. Actually, this place is very safe. Sword cultivators are unlikely to discover this place. Xiao Hua looked at Dui Qimeng and said, "Of course, Sky Patrol City is even safer. However, this way, the journey will be troublesome. Senior sister still has to be careful." "Many thanks, junior brother Xiao." Dui Qimeng nodded, while Dui Ling pouted and said unhappily, "Actually, this concubine feels that staying by Xiao Hua's side is the safest." "All right, Xiao Hua hurriedly asked, Senior Sister Dui, when are you leaving? Naturally, it's now. Dui, Chiming smiled and said, if it wasn't for us returning late from patrol duty, I heard from Hongshan that the disciples of Quanjin Mountain would have let us go. Then Senior Sister Dui should hurry. Xiao Hua's heart skipped a beat as he had a bad feeling. He raised his eyes to look at Cui Hongshan. Although Cui Hongshan only glanced at him and then looked at Dui Chimeng, there was also deep worry in his eyes. Then this concubine is leaving? Dui Chimeng looked at Cui Hongshan, and the worst thing was that her bright eyes were also looking at Xiao Hua as she whispered, then, this concubine is leaving too? Dui Ling looked like she was about to cry as she said to Xiao Hua, I'm leaving too. Damn it, it seems this has nothing to do with this young master. Xiao Hua was about to cry, but at the same time, he also knew that this was the same situation as Foul Mountain. Seeing that they were about to meet in battle, it was even worse than Foul Mountain. He might be able to escape, but it was hard to say whether the Imperial Thunder Sect's first team would be intact. He also could not hurt the two's hearts for no reason, so he could only wave his hand and said, you all should hurry back to Sky Patrol City and pass a message to Yinshi Prefecture's conference hall. Oh, what message? Dui Ling was immediately confused by Xiao Hua and asked curiously. When Xiao Hua saw this, he said in all seriousness, tell them to quickly prepare storage pouches and fill them with spirit stones. I want to kill a lot of sword cultivators in this battle and use their heads to exchange for spirit stones. Dui Ling chuckled. He clenched his fist and punched Xiao Hua's shoulder. He rebuked, this concubine was so worried about your lives. Are you really that heartless? The other disciples of the first squad of the Imperial Thunder Sect looked a bit uncomfortable. Xiao Hua was also helpless. He could neither dodge nor not dodge. Fortunately, when Dui Ling's fist landed, without waiting for him to speak, Jinshan Quanjin Mountain disciple hurried over. Upon seeing the three of them, he was overjoyed and said, 3 martial uncles, please hurry over with this junior. Martial Uncle Lon and the rest are already waiting anxiously. This junior is here to urge them. Then the disciple handed a jade slip to Cui Hongshan and said, Captain Cui, please return the previous jade slip to this junior. This jade slip has been rearranged. Yes. Cui Hongshan took the jade slip and returned the jade slip that Lon Xin had given him to the disciple. Then he said, I'll send you off. Cui Hongshan was reluctant to part with Dui Chiming. Captain Cui, the disciple said awkwardly, you should know that this is a secret. It's best not to let the other disciples know. If you send them off, this Cui understands. Cui Hongshan nodded. He looked at Dui Chiming and said, be careful on the road. This concubine understands. You must also be careful. Dui Chiming knew that the ones she should warn the most were Cui Hongshan and the others. But she couldn't say such discouraging words. She could only hint, don't force yourself. Listen to the opinions of others. This concubine will wait for my husband at Sky Patrol City. The word husband awakened Cui Hongshan's tenderness and arrogance. He nodded and didn't say anything else. He watched as Dui Chimeng, Ming Mao, and Dui Ling left with the Jinshan Quanjin Mountain disciple. After the 3 figures disappeared, Cui Hongshan waved his hand and said, fellow junior apprentice brothers, it seems that the war is imminent. Our previous thoughts were too naive. Although this place is deep underground, it has already been discovered by the sword cultivators. Let's stop patrolling for now and focus on controlling the array formation. This will give us a chance to save our lives. Yes, Zhen Minghui and the others nodded, but they didn't disperse. Cui Hongshan understood. He turned to look at Xiao Hua and said indifferently, what do you think? Nothing. Xiao Hua waved his hand. Just don't go too far from this Xiao. Then Xiao Hua turned and walked out. What are you going to do? Cui Hongshan couldn't help but ask. This Xiao is naturally going to be on duty. Xiao Hua didn't even turn his head. What nonsense! The sword cultivators were about to arrive. No matter who was in charge of Jinshan Quanjin Mountain, there probably wouldn't be a good opportunity to mine more jade essence in the future. Xiao Hua definitely needed to mine more jade essence. Thinking about how he just said that he didn't need to be on duty, Cui Hongshen was a bit angry. Captain Cui, let's hurry up and look at the array formation, Zhun Minghui hurriedly said. Junior apprentice Brother Zhao's cultivation is profound and isn't afraid of this. But we can't always rely on junior apprentice Brother Zhao's protection. If we can use a bit more of the array formation's power, we will have a bit more chance of survival. Cui Hongshen clapped his hands and took out a jade slip. He and the other 6 disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect started to comprehend it again. Tu Hong didn't personally come out to arrange the transfer of the crystal coffin. However, his gaze was the same as Cui Hongshen's, very reluctant to part from the crystal coffin that had already been concealed. Moreover, his gaze also fell on Dui Qiming's face, who was smiling like a flower. A kind of distant memory seemed to have been awakened. Contrary to Cui Hongshen's expectations, and even more contrary to Tu Hong's expectations, another 3 days passed. Unexpectedly, it was very calm and there was no difference from before. If not for the dwarves coming to spy on them, Tu Hong would almost think that Quanjin Mountain was still unknown to the sword cultivators. And Xiao Hua was even more happy. In these few days, whenever he had time, he would go up and underground. The rare and unusual jade essence had long been pried away by him. Sometimes, when Xiao Hua returned to the quiet room, he couldn't help but laugh out loud. He took out the jade essence and looked at it left and right, unable to bear to put it down. On this day, Xiao Hua was still on patrol duty. He was mining for jade essence and selling dog meat under Quanjin Mountain's mineral veins. Suddenly, he heard a series of dong, dong, dong tremors coming from the ground of Quanjin Mountain, almost causing him to raise his wishful staff to tilt. Granny, the sword cultivators are finally here. Xiao Hua hurriedly wanted to put away the wishful staff and escape back to the quiet room. However, when he saw that there was still a large piece of jade essence in front of him, he couldn't help but scratch his face and shouted, "Damn sword cultivators! You actually dare to block your grandpa's wealth. See how grandpa will deal with you." Immediately, a big staff smashed on top of it, and a fist-sized jade essence fell down. Xiao Hua stretched out his hand and firmly caught it. Only then did he return to the mineral vein. Chapter 23:36. Dong Dong. The sound became increasingly hurried, like footsteps, but also like a deliberate rhythm, smashing onto the ground and knocking on everyone's hearts. Without waiting for Xiao Hua to return to his quiet room, he heard a sharp whistle resounding throughout the entire Spring Gold mountain mine. Groups after groups of Spring Gold Mountain disciples flew out from their respective resting places and flew towards different mountain caves. The thousands of Dao sect disciples who had come as reinforcements were also nervously flying back from their quiet rooms. Although the entire mine was in a mess, it was still in an orderly manner. Xiao Hua's appearance did not attract the attention of many people. Cui Hongshen and the rest naturally came out long ago. Seeing Xiao Hua return, they did not say much and waved their hands. "Follow this Cui." As he spoke, Cui Hongshen's figure flew up and flew straight towards the space where the Imperial Thunder Sect disciples entered Quanjin Mountain. When they arrived at the rather large space, the situation inside was already different. Not to mention that the atmosphere was very tense. Every Quanjin Mountain disciple's face was tense as they hurriedly commanded the incoming Dao sect disciples. Even the number of caves in the space had increased by a lot. Previously, when Xiao Hua and the rest entered, there were 4 to 5 connected tunnels in the space. Now, there were actually 40 to 50 tunnels, filling up the entire space. Every pitch-black cave had a Quanjin Mountain disciple guarding it. Hearing the disciple in the middle shouting out the name of the group that came as reinforcements, the disciple in charge would immediately raise his hand and invite the group of disciples to enter the tunnel through the cave above their heads. And looks like Quanjin Mountain is still different from Chicken Crow Mountain. Seeing such a chaotic situation, Xiao Hua was rather confident in his heart as he thought to himself, This way, the 7 disciples of my Imperial Thunder sect will be safe. In less than the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, it was the turn of the Imperial Thunder sect. Hearing that it was the first team of the Imperial Thunder sect, the innermost disciple immediately raised his hand to signal Cui Hongshan. Cui Hongshan understood and immediately activated his transcendence energy and flew to the front of the pitch-black tunnel. The disciple on guard clapped his hands and took out 7 yellow talismans and handed them to Cui Hongshan. He said, "Team Leader Cui, these are the yellow talismans for the passage of our Mount Quanjin array. Please take them well. With these yellow talismans, you will be able to pass freely within the array for 3 hours. Of course, Captain Cui, please restrain your disciples and don't move around randomly. We have to be in sync and deal with sword cultivators together." "I know." Cui Hongshan took the yellow talisman and nodded. "Please." The disciple stepped aside and raised his hand. "Please." Cui Hongshan also clasped his hands together and raised his head to take a look. His silhouette then flew up and rushed into the tunnel. After that, everyone followed suit, with Xiao Hua flying at the back. The tunnel was normal, but what was abnormal was that other than Cui Hongshan and the first team of the Imperial Thunder sect, no other cultivators entered the tunnel. The cultivators of Jin Quan Mountain hurriedly set up their formation. Similarly, outside the mountain range of Jin Quan Mountain, a murderous aura soared to the heavens. A few li away from the Golden Spring Mountain, under the rare clear sky, within a radius of a few li, there was a spirit beast that was several zhang tall and 10 zhang long. It was unusually thick and sturdy, and it was approaching the Golden Spring Mountain in unison. The rhythm that was pounding on the ground was produced by these huge beasts. This was not including the trees. The most terrifying thing was that when these spirit beasts were pushed forward by a foot, the huge rocks, gentle slopes, and trees in front of them were all destroyed by them. When these huge beasts saw the huge rocks in front of them, they immediately spat out a kind of liquid from an oval fist-sized hole on their faces and landed on the rocks. Following that, from another small hole under the same hole, an earthen yellow light was emitted. Following that, the huge rocks immediately turned soft and slightly collapsed. By the time the huge beasts kicked a leg that was thicker than a pillar, the huge rocks had already turned into a pile of mud. Needless to say, the trees did not need any liquid. As long as the earthen yellow light swept past them, they would all collapse and turn into chips under the huge paws of the huge beasts. Behind the huge beasts, there were thousands of sword cultivators. All of them walked on their swords, and their faces were extremely solemn. However, these sword cultivators who looked aloof and arrogant were just like their characters. They kept a distance from the huge beasts, as if they did not want to be associated with them. Looking at the sky above the huge beasts, there were hundreds of bird cultivators hovering in midair and gradually surrounding Jin Quan Mountain. A few miles away from the sword cultivators, in midair, Ling Yunwu was leading dozens of sword-nurturing disciples. He looked coldly at them. Beside him, there were also a few illusory sword cultivators and a few high-level beast cultivators. The bird cultivator Ing Chao was also among them. Sword friend Yuan Qing. Ling Yunwu finally could not hold it in and frowned. "Your sky-scraping sword sect. With such preparations, aren't you giving the cultivators of Jin Quan Mountain a way out? If they escape from the south, then this Ling's matter." Cough, cough. That old man dressed in khaki sword robes was Yuan Qing of the sky-scraping sword sect. He coughed and looked at the few sword cultivators who were also illusory sword cultivators. He said, "Sword friend Ling, this is not where your sword sect is defending. That's why you have such thoughts. If you were in my place, I'm afraid you wouldn't say that." "Sai, I understand." Ling Yunwu smiled bitterly. Sword Friend's arrangement is to make the cultivators have the intention to retreat and give up on the spiritual stone mine of Jin Quan Mountain. Then, we sword cultivators can take it down without shedding any blood. Yes, my sky-scraping sword sect and a few other sword sects indeed have such plans, Yuan Qing said without hiding anything. Furthermore, We have also considered that if the so-called terrifying phoenix is really at Jean Quan Mountain, he will definitely not escape. He might even take the initiative to fight. Don't forget, he is a golden core cultivator. If he escapes, he will lose all his face. Terrifying phoenix? Ling Yunwu's face showed a trace of displeasure. He said softly, "Sword friend Yuan Qing, I have never mentioned it before, right? Don't pin this on me." "Hee, did I say it was you?" Yuan Qing laughed. "I don't care if he is a terrifying phoenix or a terrifying chicken. Even if he is a golden core cultivator, he will not be able to escape from my hands today." Then, Yuan Qing turned his head and asked, "Sword friendly, is there any problem with this blood calamity beast?" A fat beast cultivator stepped forward and answered with a smile, "Sword friend Yuan, don't worry. Although my Mystic Valley cannot be compared to the other beast cultivator sects in the sword domain, we are still good at rearing spiritual beasts. This blood calamity beast is good at harming spiritual trees and tormenting the soil. No other spiritual beasts can compare to it." "Hee, that's right." Ing Chao also laughed in a sharp voice. "Even the old me is unfamiliar with this beast. If I had not discussed with the sword friends of the beast cultivators on how to dig out the Dao sect cultivators from underground a few days ago, the old me would not have known that this beast was actually so useful. This beast is meant for other purposes. It is normal that Senior Ing does not know about it." Li Min said respectfully, "If not for the fact that these spiritual beasts are scattered all over the sword domain, making it troublesome for me to gather them, the attack would have started a few days ago. I hope it will not delay Senior's plan. Don't mention it. With this beast, we have saved a lot of trouble. I can't thank you enough." Ing Chao replied with a smile. The Valley Master of the Mystic Valley, Li Min, was a small figure in the sword domain. The Mystic Valley was a sect similar to the Spirit Husbandry sect in the country of Shi. In terms of cultivation, it was far inferior to the union of man and beast cultivators. Li Min had always lived in the sword domain with his tail between his legs, doing things that other beast cultivators were not willing to do. Usually, no swordsman thought highly of him. Now that he was suddenly put in an important position, he felt overwhelmed by favor. "After we break through the Golden Spring Mountain today, I will make the decision to reward you with some of my beast cultivator's secret techniques. I will let you know the true profoundness of beast cultivators." Ing Chao looked at the fatty and was pleased with himself as he said casually, "Yes, thank you, Senior Ing." The fatty almost bowed and kowtowed. He did not have the bearing of a valley master. "Friend Ling Jianyu, why isn't your fellow sect members here yet?" Seeing that the blood calamity beast had already reached the Golden Spring Mountain, Yuan Qing glanced at the talkative beast cultivator and asked, "When the blood calamity beast crosses the mountain and enters the forest of the Golden Spring Mountain, the disciples of the Golden Spring Mountain will come out. When that time comes, the Golden Core Cultivator will definitely come out. Do you want to accept the challenge?" "Of course I will accept the challenge." Ling Yunwu laughed coldly. "I will definitely make up for my own mistakes. Up to you." Yuan Qing expressed that he did not feel any pressure. But Ling Yunwu once again looked anxiously in the direction of the soaring windsword sect. A few days had already passed. There was no reason for his fellow sect members to not be here. Moreover, if he was alone, he really did not have the confidence to capture that terrifying phoenix. Outside the Golden Spring mountain range, there was an orderly attack. But Tu Hong of the Golden Spring Mountain could no longer sit still. Facing the light screen in front of the triangular magic tool, he asked in disbelief, "Old Brother Lon, this beast, what is it? How come this old man has never heard of it before?" This old man is also ignorant and inexperienced." Lon Exon ruefully smiled and then explained, "There are many beast cultivators in the sword domain. It isn't strange for strange spirit beasts to appear. It's not strange that it's strange, but there are so many strange spirit beasts that I find strange." Tu Hong said with a bitter taste in his mouth. He did not send out the disciples of the Golden Spring Mountain or the Dao sect because he wanted to use the thick layer of earth on top of the Golden Spring Mountain's defensive array formation as a layer of defense. This would waste the strength of the sword cultivators and beast cultivators, and when they were tired, the cultivators would rush out and take advantage of the situation. But now, it seemed that Tu Hong's calculations were wrong. Moreover, facing so many spirit beasts, facing so many sword cultivators, after this battle, even if the Golden Spring Mountain won, it would still be a bloodbath. And this was only what Tu Hong saw through the magic tool. If he knew that there were still dozens of illusory swordsmen that had yet to arrive, he might not even have any thoughts of winning. Chapter 23:37. Pung, pung. The orderly footsteps that shook the entire ground stopped. It was the thousands of blood calamity beasts that stopped and arrived at the foot of the Golden Spring Mountain. Not all of the blood calamity beasts had a beast cultivator on their backs. However, when a beast cultivator on a blood calamity beast patted the blood calamity beast below him, the surrounding blood calamity beasts all stopped and pointed the black holes on their faces at the stone wall. Obviously, this stone wall was nothing in the eyes of the blood calamity beasts. However, the sword cultivators behind the blood calamity beasts did not give them a chance to show off. Seeing that the blood calamity beasts had stopped, 3 sword cultivators flew to the blood calamity beasts in a group. When the blood calamity beasts saw the sword cultivators approaching, they raised their heads and roared. The black holes on their faces also turned towards the sword cultivators. Hiss! The beast cultivators on the blood calamity beasts pursed their lips and let out a strange hiss. It was like the hiss of a poisonous snake in the grass. When they heard the hiss, all of the blood calamity beasts quietened down and lowered their heads. Rise! The 3 sword cultivators flew below the blood calamity beasts and stretched out their hands to support the blood calamity beasts. They roared in unison, and the huge blood calamity beasts slowly flew up toward the top of Jin Quan Mountain. These little fellows, they actually have to form a group of 3. They really lack cultivation. Yuan Qing watched from afar and commented with a smile. If it was me back then, I would be able to carry a blood calamity beast up the mountain. Of course, which of the swordsmen of senior Yuan's generation did not train hard? They fought against soul cultivators in the snowy highlands. They are definitely not something that the younger generation can compare to. Fatty Li Min smiled apologetically and said, "Of course, the swordsmen of your sect are also very good. It's all because our disciples are useless and cannot bring these spiritual beasts up the mountain. They actually want to use this layer of soil to block my sword cultivator's attack. The cultivators of the Dao sect really know how to dream." Ing Chao squinted his eyes and saw that his disciples were all in the air. He knew that the cultivators of Jin Quan Mountain were all hiding under the soil. Naturally, he could guess Tu Hong's plan. However, Ling Yunwu was a little distracted. Until now, the disciples of the Windsword sect had not arrived. Something must have happened. At that moment, the bird cultivators in the sky became a little disorganized. Ing Chao frowned when he realized that something was wrong. However, before he could frown, the bird cultivators quieted down again. In the direction of the Huan nation, a dozen small dots flew over from afar. Young friendling, your senior brothers are here." Ing Chao glanced around, and a divine light flashed in his eyes. He had already seen the black dot clearly. He turned his head and smiled at Ling Yunwu. "All right." Although Ling Yunwu could not see it clearly, he still nodded and smiled. "If that's the case, my sword cultivator will definitely be able to take down Quan Jin Shan. There are more than 10 illusory swordsmen. If we still can't take down Quan Jin Shan, our reputation as sword cultivators will be ruined by the Ling Feng sword sect," Yuan Qing said with a fake smile. Don't worry, Senior Yuan. I'm only looking for that golden core cultivator. As for anything else, I won't ask," Ling Yunwu said with a smile. And Yuan Qing seemed to be nodding, but he did not seem to have heard it. His voice was extremely soft, as if he did not care at all. When the illusory swordsman landed on the ground, Ling Yunwu's expression changed drastically. It turned out that Yuan was also among the 10 illusory swordsmen. "Husband, Yuan smiled and was about to speak when she heard Ling Yunwu scolding. I've already told you. You're only at the second grade of the illusory sword realm. You won't be of any use here. Furthermore, the Chestnut Little Moon Valley is more important. It's our Ling Feng sword sex matter. Why didn't you listen to me and rushed over? Yuan was not angry and smiled apologetically. I know what's more important. Chestnut Little Moon Valley has our Ling Feng sword sect, Chant sword sect, and the other 3 sword sects. Those disciples are enough. Furthermore, sword friend Su Anhua of the Heavy Peak Sword Manor is not in the Sword Manor. Our Ling Feng sword sect only has 2 swordsmen whose flying swords can drill into the ground. I'm afraid these 2 swordsmen will not be able to force the Golden Core Cultivator out of the Spirit Stone mine. That's why I wanted to help my husband. That's why I rushed over. While Yuan was talking to Ling Yunwu, the other swordsman also greeted Yuan Qing and the other swordsman. Seeing this situation, Ling Yunwu sighed and said, "Sigh, that's the only way. Since you're here, how can I chase you away?" Husband, I'll be careful. Don't worry." Yuan giggled and replied, "Let's go take a look." Yuan Qing flicked his sleeves and said, "Although the Soaring Wind Sword sect and the other sword friends are here to help, and this Golden Spring Mountain is definitely not a problem, we still have to be careful and not let too many disciples die. Senior Yuan, you go ahead first." Ling Yunwu thought for a moment and said, "Junior will discuss with my senior brothers how to kill our way into Jin Quan Mountain. All right, all of you stay back for the time being. Be a hidden backup." Yuan Qing nodded and flew into the air. The other swordsmen and beast cultivators also flew up. At this moment, the Blood Calamity Beast had already landed on the forest of Jin Quan Mountain. Thousands of Blood Calamity Beasts once again lined up in a row and slowly pushed forward. In the blink of an eye, the lush green pines and cypresses were turned into its shavings and scattered across the soil. If the Dao sect cultivators were not scared out of their wits by our huge attack, then their brains must have been damaged by their so-called magic arts. Yuan Qing's figure stopped in midair as he squinted his eyes and coldly said, "Even if the soil of Jin Quan Mountain is very thick and even very hard, under the huge palms of the Blood Calamity Beast, it will be destroyed sooner or later. If they don't come out to fight now, could it be that they are waiting until—" Unfortunately, before he could finish his sentence, a loud rumbling sound could be heard from the forest of Jin Quan Mountain. The entire mountain range shook and many Blood Calamity Beasts lost their balance and fell to the ground. The beast cultivators on their backs also fell to the ground. In an instant, the neat formation of the Blood Calamity Beasts became messy. Many Blood Calamity Beasts even fled in fear. If they were not stepping on the fallen Blood Calamity Beasts, they were stepping on the fallen beast cultivators. It was a complete mess. Fatty Li Min's face was filled with panic as he hurriedly smiled apologetically. "Senior Ing, this is the bad thing about the Blood Calamity Beasts. They are too cowardly and will flee at the slightest sign of danger. Quickly go and pacify them." Ing Chao lightly nodded his head. "Even if the Dao sect cultivators come out, we will have swordsmen in the air to welcome them. Beast cultivators only need to destroy the soil layer." Yes, Junior will go right now." Li Min wiped the sweat off his face as he hurriedly flew into midair. With a clap of his hand, a fist-sized drum appeared. Then he reached in his chest and took out a long white bone. Without hesitation, he hit the drum on the drum. Chapter 2338. Boom! All the Blood Calamity Beasts that were running around in a panic were stunned. They stood there, not daring to move at all. Dong dong, Li Min knocked twice again. The Blood Calamity Beast began to slowly move to its original position. The Blood Calamity Beast and the Beast Cultivator disciples who were lying on the ground struggled for a while before they stood up. Dong dong dong. Li Min began to beat the drum rhythmically. The Blood Calamity Beasts began to move forward again. Looking at the forest again, there were dozens of places where the mana started to fluctuate. The surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth started to gather. Wong sound could be heard from dozens of places. Following that, an earthen yellow light appeared. Dozens and hundreds of teams of Golden Spring, Mountain Disciples, and cultivators from the three kingdoms flew out from the light. When the cultivators flew out, they did not stop. They immediately activated the weapons in their hands and smashed them at the blood calamity beasts. These cultivators could not hold back anymore. They even crawled out from their turtle shells. When Yuanqing saw this, he almost laughed out loud. He pointed his finger, and the flying sword under his feet shone with sword light. He had the urge to give it a try. The sword cultivators in the sky, who had been on guard all this time, naturally reacted to Yuanqing's thoughts. When they saw the abnormality on the ground, they immediately activated their sword energy. Sword lights of different colors shot towards the ground like fireworks. Even though the sword cultivators' flying sword were fast, they were not as close as the cultivators to the blood calamity beasts. Before the thousands of flying swords could reach half of them, the Dao sect cultivators' weapons had already hit the blood calamity beasts. Roar! Seeing the many weapons flying towards them and tearing apart the dense spiritual chi of heaven and earth around the forest, the blood calamity beasts that were attacked by the weapons roared angrily. The black holes above their heads spat out a thin liquid as they tried their best to defend themselves. However, the cultivator's magic artifact easily dodged the liquid, which was nothing special, and quickly smashed into the blood calamity beast. The blood calamity beasts were huge, and it was not easy to dodge. However, when the weapons hit them, the blood calamity beast bodies swelled up as if they were inflated. Puff, puff, puff. A series of sounds could be heard. The Dharma artifact had struck the blood calamity beast. To everyone's surprise, the ferocious-looking blood calamity beast only had a frightening body. No matter how big or small the cultivator's magic treasures were, they all pierced through the blood calamity beast's skin and entered its body. Then, the Dharma artifact appeared from the other side of the blood calamity beast's body, dripping with blood. Roar! The injured blood calamity beast roared, and its huge body slowly fell to the ground. Blood continuously flowed out from the bloody hole. Looking at the blood calamity beasts that were not attacked by the Dharma artifact, they panicked and scattered in all directions, trying to escape. Ing Chao, who had an extremely ugly expression on his face, came to a realization when he heard the roars that rose and fell throughout the entire mountain range. These roars were not angry roars, but the roars of fear and panic from the blood calamity beast. Li Min, why is this blood disaster beast so weak? Ing Chao could not help but look at Li Min, who was about to fly up into the sky. Fatty Li Min's face was already dripping with sweat, and his expression was extremely ugly. He laughed bitterly. Elder Ing, this is how the blood calamity beast is. I have already told Elder Yuan about it before I came here. Sigh. Yuanqing sighed and laughed bitterly. Of course I know about it, but when I saw how huge the blood calamity beast is, no matter what, it should have some defensive power, but I did not expect it to be so weak. If the blood calamity beast's defensive power was any stronger, I am afraid we would have already known about this spiritual beast's name. Another beast cultivator said thoughtfully, I will go and pacify the blood calamity beast. Li Min had already flown up, and the small drum in his hand appeared again. Yuanqing also said, I will go too. This blood calamity beast is the key to attacking Jinshan Quan. We cannot lose it. I will lead the swordsmen to protect the blood calamity beast. The cultivators of Jinshan Quan were stunned. They did not expect the blood calamity beast to be killed so easily. But before they could use their Dharma artifacts to attack the other blood calamity beasts, the flying swords of the sword cultivators had already flown above their heads. Kill! The cultivators hurriedly threw out their yellow talismans and activated their Dharma artifacts, wanting to block the flying swords of the sword cultivators. At this moment, the strength of different cultivators could be seen. Those who were prepared and had abundant Dharma artifacts and had good control over their Dharma artifacts. When the yellow talismans were used to block the sharpness of the flying swords, their Dharma artifacts were like venomous snakes, showing their viciousness. They swayed their Dharma artifacts, absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to attack the flying swords. Not to mention the lotus flowers, which are the Dharma artifacts of a Kunlun sect female cultivator, blocking the flying swords that streaked across the sky like lightning between the lotus leaves. Not to mention the green clouds in the morning, which gave birth to the vitality of the day and night, which were the Dharma artifacts of a Foundation Establishment middle-stage cultivator from Chichiao sect, which wrapped around the flying swords that were like the scorching sun in the sky. Not to mention the jade snake, which was the Dharma artifacts of a Foundation Establishment early-stage cultivator from Taiching sect, which bared its fangs and brandished its claws as it rushed into the air, swallowing the flying swords that were like pitch-black pellets but were condensed with extremely sharp sword intent. However, an ardent Fire Mountain disciple wearing a blood-red Taoist robe saw that he did not have time to activate his Dharma artifact. His eyebrows furrowed and he raised his hand. The blood-red Taoist robe flew away from his body and turned into a blood cloud above his head, blocking the two flying swords that were about to pierce his head. This was enough to make Yuan Qing, who was flying in the air, feel astonished. The attacks of sword cultivators had always been sharp and incisive. It was the pride of sword cultivators and also the reason why sword cultivators looked down on other cultivators. However, at this moment, the outstanding performance of the Dao sect cultivators made Yuan Qing feel astonished. However, in just a few breaths, waves of heart-wrenching screams rose and fell in the forest. Yuan Qing's divine sense swept over, and the corners of his mouth unconsciously curled into a smile. Among the thousands of cultivators that suddenly appeared, only 20% of them made Yuan Qing look at them in a new light. After blocking the sharp flying swords of the sword cultivators, they immediately counterattacked, killing the sword cultivators at the same time as clouds of blood mist appeared. There were also cultivators in the surroundings who were barely able to block the flying swords of the sword cultivators and had to activate their Dharma artifacts and Dharma artifacts in preparation for a counterattack. As for the remaining 40% of cultivators, they were in a disadvantageous position, not to mention being flustered. Even if they activated their Dharma chi to cast spells or activated their Dharma artifacts, they were like paper in front of the various flying swords of the sword cultivators. Most of the screams that rose and fell in the forest came from the mouths of these cultivators. Blossoms of blood were comparable to the sunset, dyeing the sky and the forest red. Lives were comparable to mayflies, only revealing themselves for a moment before falling into the abyss. Chapter 23:39. Dong, dong, dong. Fatty Li Min's small drum sounded again. Instead of saying that it was a secret skill that he used to pacify the blood calamity beast, it was more appropriate to say that he was pacifying the hundreds of sword cultivators and cultivators who had lost their lives during the battle. The blood calamity beast gradually calmed down, but its eyes were filled with excitement. The blood-red color that flashed across the entire forest was provoking the blood calamity beast's desire. Rumble, pung, 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 all kinds of sounds and brilliance flashed on the battlefield. Corpses and fresh blood became the main melody in the eyes of the cultivators and swordsmen. Wang, seeing that the swordsmen had gained the upper hand and the beast cultivators swooped down from the sky, the forest emitted an earthy yellow light, and waves of spiritual power appeared. The cultivators who had been fighting hard finally relaxed. They formed a spell with their hands, and with a flash of light, all of them disappeared into the ground. Of course, at this moment, there were still dozens of cultivators who could not dodge the sword cultivators' flying swords, and their corpses were left in the forest. Roar, the blood calamity beasts that had lost a portion of their lives, were suddenly excited. They leaped up and rushed toward the corpses that were scattered all over the ground. Blood-red tentacles extended out from the black holes on their faces. These tentacles had jagged protrusions that were about an inch long. These tentacles wrapped around the bloody corpses, and with a slight twitch, the blood calamity beasts tore off large chunks of flesh from the corpses, and with a slight flip, they were thrown into the black holes of the blood calamity beasts. Quick! Stop it! Yuan Qing was furious. Among the corpses, most of them were cultivators, but there were also many sword cultivators. He could not allow the blood calamity beasts to feast on the corpses. Yes, yes. Fatty Li Min wiped off the sweat on his forehead again, and his hands quickly hit the small drum. The sonorous sound of the drum resounded across the battlefield. When the blood calamity beasts heard the sound of the drum, they were first agitated, but then they gradually calmed down. However, the blood that filled the battlefield spread in the mouths and minds of the blood calamity beasts. Gradually, the blood overwhelmed the sound of the drum, and the blood calamity beasts became agitated again and rushed toward the corpses. Damn it! Yuan Qing was furious. He waved his hand, and a green sword gleam flashed. Two blood disaster beasts that were devouring the sword cultivator's corpse fell to the ground. However, there were more blood calamity beasts than corpses to begin with. As soon as the two blood calamity beasts fell to the ground, the other three blood calamity beasts rushed over and continued to devour the corpses. Yuan Qing waved his hand again, and the three blood calamity beasts fell to the ground again. The five blood calamity beast corpses blocked the two sword cultivator corpses, and no other blood calamity beast charged forward. However, there were more than 5 blood calamity beasts on the battlefield. How could the corpse of a sword cultivator be the only one on the ground? Moreover, the swordsmen's corpses were piled up together with the cultivators' corpses, and it was hard to tell them apart. The blood calamity beasts tore the corpses apart, and the swordsmen's eyes were filled with blood. Although they were used to seeing blood, many of them were still pale and could not help but vomit. There were also dozens of swordsmen who saw Yuan Qing attacking, and they waved their flying swords to kill the blood calamity beasts. However, after killing a few blood calamity beasts, they realized that it was futile. Just as they were about to think of another way, Fatty Li Min's drumming stopped. He said faintly, "Fellow swordsmen, these blood calamity beasts feed on flesh and blood. Now that they're surrounded by flesh and blood, they are unable to control themselves. I think if we swordsmen were to encounter such a situation, we might not be able to control ourselves. We still need these blood calamity beasts to contribute to this battle. If we kill them now, the soil layer on Mount Quanjin will not be removed. In my opinion, why don't, after the battle, we kill all these blood calamity beasts to punish them for offending the swordsmen's corpses and to appease the souls of the swordsmen in heaven?" Li Min's voice was filled with sorrow, and it echoed in the air. When it mixed with the sound of the blood calamity beasts eating the corpses, it made one's heart ache. Fellow swordsmen, use your fastest flying techniques to bring the fallen swordsmen away from the ground and snatch their corpses from the mouths of the blood calamity beasts. Yuan Qing and Ying Chao flew up at the same time and said loudly, "They use their lives to protect the honor of swordsmen. We cannot let their corpses become food for the spiritual beasts. But don't hurt the blood calamity beasts. With them, we will have fewer casualties, and we will be able to kill the cultivators of the Dao sect." Yes, many sword cultivators had tears in their eyes. They responded at the same time, and their figures shot into the forest like lightning. As for the bird cultivators flying in the air, they let out sharp cries as they swooped down. Within Mount Quanjin, Tu Hong narrowed his eyes, coldly staring at the curtain of light. He looked at the bloodstains on the battlefield, and at the corpses in the mouths of the blood calamity beasts. No wonder we didn't know about these blood calamity beasts. Lan Exan muttered to herself, her face cloudy and uncertain. All of a sudden, Tu Hong, who was sitting upright on the chair, moved. His hands formed a seal, and a ray of light hit the Mitsubishi's magic tool. Immediately, a fiery red ray of light shot out from the magic tool and rushed to all sides of the cave, disappearing without a trace. Great General, do we still want to attack? Lon Exine nearly cried out in alarm. Many of the disciples haven't rested yet, and I fear that they haven't even taken pills yet. How can we attack now? I am inferior to you when it comes to managing the internal affairs of Mount Quanjin, but when it comes to fighting, you are inferior to me. Tu Hong's eyes were cold as he looked at the curtain of light. He faintly replied, "At this time, the blood calamity beasts are eating. Presumably, it won't be long before they become 100 times more energetic. My Mount Quanjin will soon be broken through by them. Moreover, the sword cultivators are saving their corpses. This is the best time to sneak attack them. My Mount Quanjin has fewer cultivators than the sword cultivators that came to attack, so we are at a disadvantage. If we don't attack now, when will we? Also, the blood calamity beasts are tearing apart the corpses of my Dao sect cultivators. When my Dao sect disciples see this, how can they not kill these spirit beasts?" Tu Hong's eyes twitched as he spoke. Yes, Lon Xian's face was filled with extreme helplessness. But she couldn't help but admit that what Tu Hong said was indeed reasonable. Sure enough, even the sword cultivators and bird cultivators would never have thought that the cultivators that had just escaped would suddenly appear. They were caught off guard, and in several breaths of time, even more sword cultivators fell. At the same time, another 20% of the blood calamity beasts fell into pools of their own blood. Kill! The Dao sect cultivators saw their fellow Taoists that had been full of vigor and vitality a moment ago, but now they had all died miserable deaths and had become food for the spirit beasts. Their eyes were already red with envy. Even if they were to be injured, they would still kill these evil beasts that disturbed the peace of the dead. Chapter 2340. Seeing that the formation of the sword cultivators was a little messy, Yuan Qing transmitted his voice loudly. Disciples who are pregnant with swords snatch the corpses of the swordsmen. Disciples who are drawing their swords kill the cultivators. This sentence woke up the swarm of sword cultivators. In less than 10 minutes, the situation on the battlefield was reversed and the sword cultivators gained the upper hand again. Fortunately, at this moment, the cultivator's formation lit up again and brought the cultivator, whose magic power had been depleted, into the formation. Seeing that the cultivators were defeated, the sword cultivators moved again. Half of the sword cultivators stood on their flying swords and stared at the ground with bright eyes, guarding against the sneak attack of the cultivators. The other half of the sword cultivators rushed into the group of blood calamity beasts and snatched the corpses of the fallen swordsmen. Sigh. Ing Chao stood straight in the air, and his face was expressionless. However, there was a hint of sympathy in his eyes as he sighed. I just came into contact with the cultivators, and this battle has turned out like this. This is really beyond my expectations. The battle is not something that we can compare to. Yuan Qing looked at the pool of blood on the ground and said coldly, "Even if we were to enter with the cultivation of the illusory sword, there is a possibility of death. However, this situation has indeed exceeded our expectations. But what is the result? The warriors of the sword region far surpass the cultivators of the Dao sect. If we can't kill the cultivators, how can we face our elders?" Ing Chao laughed coldly. "When we break through the defense of Mount Quanjin, I will bathe Mount Quanjin in blood. In the next 4 hours, the cultivators of the Dao sect did not come, and the blood calamity beasts were full. Under the command of the beast cultivators of the Maze Valley, they raised their huge palms and continued to break through the forest of Mount Quanjin. The corpses of the cultivators that were not swallowed turned into blood under their feet and seeped into the ground. All the sword cultivators were flying in the air, and their eyes were filled with anger and hatred. They looked at the blood calamity beasts and the ground of Mount Quanjin. The sword radiance around them was breathing and expanding and contracting from time to time. They were deliberately preparing to welcome the cultivators' attack. The corpses of cultivators and swordsmen were piled up under the blood calamity beast's feet. How could they tell the difference when they stepped on the blood at the same time? The tentacles in the blood calamity beast's black hole were strange as well. Just one of them was enough to tear the flesh of several corpses apart. Even though the swordsman was fast and the bird cultivator's eyesight was sharp, they still couldn't tell. Therefore, only the disciples who were pregnant with swords managed to snatch dozens of intact corpses of the swordsman. The rest had all turned into meat paste and blended together with the corpses of the cultivators and the black soil. Needless to say, even if the blood disaster beast completely destroyed the forest, this place would definitely become a thriving place in the next year or the year after that. Perhaps the cycle of prosperity and decline, the cycle of life and death, was between destruction and rebirth. As the blood calamity beast pushed forward inch by inch, the color of the forest gradually faded away, revealing the snow-covered ground. However, the passageway that Xiaohua and the rest used to enter the underground was not revealed, as it had already been destroyed by the disciples of Jinshan Mountain. Great General, what should we do now? Lan Xian frowned as she watched the blood disaster beast destroy the forest. This sword cultivator actually destroyed the entire forest of Jinshan Mountain. It seems that they have the intention of completely taking over Jinshan Mountain. Tu Hong was also in an extremely difficult position. It wasn't that he didn't have a backup plan, but this was just the beginning. This blood disaster beast didn't have any attack power, and yet he had to take out such a powerful backup plan. If the sword cultivator made another move, wouldn't he have no strength to fight back? Tu Hong's eyebrows tightened, as if they were twisted together. He waved his hand and sneered. The sword cultivator has the blood disaster beast, but my Dao sect has the mortal body of a cultivator. Now that things have reached this point, there's no need to speak of mercy or tolerance. Even if you're not a disciple of my Jinshan Mountain, you should still have the awareness that you will perish here. Lan Xian nodded. Just as she was about to speak, there was some movement outside the cave. Who is it? Tu Hong's face was as cold as ice. He waved his hand, and a brilliant light shot towards the cave entrance. Immediately, several cultivators rushed into the cave, accompanied by a Jinshan Mountain disciple. Great General! The disciple's face was filled with panic. He nervously said, This subordinate was unable to, it was these Rocky Border sect fellow Taoists that forced this subordinate. Humph! These Rocky Border sect disciples don't know the rules of my Jinshan Mountain, but you do. Tu Hong coldly said, What is the crime of trespassing into the commander's tent during a great battle? The disciple's face was ashen, but at this time, he stiffened his neck and replied, Reporting to the Great General, this subordinate understands. During a great battle, trespassing into the commander's tent is punishable by death. As long as you know, Tu Hong nodded, then you should know what to do. Yes, this subordinate understands. The disciple bowed and turned to leave. Senior 2, a middle foundation establishment cultivator leading the group coldly, said, We came to reinforce Jinshan Mountain, but we didn't come to watch Senior 2 and his subordinates put on a show. What business do you have? Tu Hong lightly asked, not bothering to explain. We Dao sect disciples came to Jinshan Mountain as reinforcements because we were prepared to put our lives on the line. However, if we were to die in Jinshan Mountain, our corpses must be left behind and brought back to Rocky Border sect. But what about Senior 2's actions? Other sword cultivators still know to send disciples to retrieve the corpses of their fallen disciples. But the corpses of our Dao sect cultivators were left on the ground for no reason. Not only did they not retrieve them, they were trampled on by the giant beast and were even eaten alive by the giant beast. Senior 2, such a method, isn't it chilling the hearts of our reinforcements? Are you waiting for me to finish? Tu Hong nodded and asked. Also, the yellow talismans on our bodies, although we can enter and exit the array, if the array is not opened, we can't enter the array at all. How is this different from not having any yellow talismans? If the array is not opened, wouldn't we have to fight the sword cultivators to the death? Is anything else? Tu Hong still nodded. At this moment, a deep voice sounded, reporting to the Great General, the disciples who violated the military order have been beheaded. Bring it in. Tu Hong's eyebrows did not raise as he casually replied, yes. Following the sound of that voice, a wave of firm footsteps came in. A robust chi refining cultivator walked in with a vermilion painted board in his hand. On the board was a large head. It was none other than the Foundation establishment cultivator who went out to receive punishment. Seeing that the blood on the board had yet to dry and the two eyes on the head had yet to close, the Rocky Border sect disciples could not help but exclaim. They did not expect that Tu Hong was actually serious. Chapter 2341. Brother. Tu Hong stepped forward and bowed deeply. He stretched out his right hand and slowly placed it on his head. This too is untalented and can only bring you to this point. From now on, you have to walk your own path. Following Tu Hong's right hand, his head was filled with hatred. He hated that he couldn't die on the battlefield and close his eyes. Senior 2, there's no need to do this. The leader of the Rock Border sect disciples said with regret, this fellow Taoist was forced to come here by us. Tu Hong suddenly turned his head and swept his gaze across the disciples. Even the middle-stage Foundation establishment disciples were startled. A layer of goosebumps appeared on their bodies, and they almost took half a step back. Their true essence flowed rapidly, as if guarding against Tu Hong. But Tu Hong didn't make any move. He waved his hand and said, take this brother's head and bury it with his corpse. Then tell those who want to go out and snatch their brother's corpse that it's a small matter to snatch the corpse, but it's a big matter to protect Jin Quan Mountain. No matter where our brother's corpse is, our heart is to bury them in their graves. Yes, this subordinate understands. The Chi refinement disciples' tiger-like eyes glistened with tears. Also, Tu Hong raised his head and said, if this Tu falls here, you all must not collect my corpse. Let this Tu's flesh and blood coexist with this Jin Quan Mountain. Yes, the Chi refinement disciple puffed out his chest and said loudly. He turned around and left. After watching the Chi refining disciple leave, the disciples of the Rocky Border sect looked at each other in dismay. Although they had thought of many countermeasures and hypothesized many of Tu Hong's actions, but this move was something they could never have imagined even in their wildest dreams. Immediately, the leader of the Rock Border sect disciples bowed and said, Senior 2, this junior was wrong. This is really a big mistake. Please punish us. As soon as he said this, the other disciples hurriedly bowed and shouted, this junior was wrong. Please punish us. Tu Hong's face that was always calm like water had a trace of a smile. He walked steadily to the front of the disciples and reached out to help them up. He said, you are wrong, but you are also not wrong. The fault lies in the fact that sword cultivators invaded my country of Shi and stepped into the territory of my Sky Patrol city. Yes, seeing that Tu Hong had no intention of killing them, the disciples of the Rock Border sect felt relieved and smiled apologetically. Although all of you are in the wrong, but all of you are not my Spring Jin Mountain's disciples, and do not understand my Spring Jin Mountain's military rules. This is also my fault. The smile on Tu Hong's face gradually disappeared, and he continued, those who don't know can't be blamed, even in my Quan Jin Mountain. Now that we're in the middle of a war, this old man won't say anything unnecessary. Go and guard the formation well. Act according to this old man's orders. If anyone slacks off on the military rules, this old man won't show any mercy. Yes, this junior understands. The hearts of several Rock Border sect disciples trembled as they bowed in salute. Someone come, bring back the fellow Taoists who came as reinforcements. Lan Xin hurriedly shouted out. After the patrolling disciples took away the several Rocky Edge faction disciples, Lan Xin looked at Tu Hong and then stared at the light screen. She said in a soft voice, like this, the cultivators of the various sects should be able to calm down. But how many illusory swordsmen have come? If there are too many, then my Spring Jin Mountain's array formation won't be able to block them. It was as if what happened just now was nothing more than an ordinary scene. The lives of the Spring Gene Mountain disciples were like duckweeds floating in the wild. According to this old man's estimate, there shouldn't be more than 5 illusory swordsmen. According to the intelligence, there shouldn't be more than 4 sword sects attacking Spring Gene Mountain, and each sword sect should have an illusory sword. They shouldn't have come out in full force. Tu Hong didn't care about this. He sneered. In fact, this old man would rather have more sword cultivators come. The more illusory swordsmen there are, this old man will become more famous. Yes. Although Lan Xen didn't understand Tu Hong's plan, she still replied. What this old man is worried about is that Yu Meng and the others have been gone for a long time, and there still hasn't been any news from them. I don't know if they've reached Sky Patrol City yet. As he spoke of Yu Meng, Tu Hong's face revealed a trace of worry. The sword cultivator's attention is all on the Spirit Stone mine. They won't be distracted by any random cultivators. Lord General, please rest assured. What could Lan Xen say? She could only comfort Tu Hong. What about the other disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect? Lan Xen seemed to think of something. She asked with some doubt. I don't think I've seen them go out to meet the enemy. Huh? Tu Hong didn't answer. He pointed at the light screen and said, the giant beasts are tired. Should we attack them again? What the Lord General says is right. This is the best time to kill these giant beasts. Lan Xen tactfully didn't mention it again. It was as if the disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect had already died. The disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect naturally wouldn't die. They followed the instructions in the Jade Slip and entered the tunnel. Then, they flew along the spacious tunnel. However, after flying for a moment, the tunnel turned downwards and they flew along several forks. Luckily, the Jade Slip was marked, so Cui Hongshan wasn't afraid of getting lost. He picked one of the paths and continued down. After flying like this for the time it took to eat a meal, they arrived at a large abandoned cave. Oh, Xiao Hua's eyes swept over the cave, a bit surprised in his heart. It was obvious that there were many exits in the cave. Not only that, but the inside of the cave was filled with dim, bright flower stones. In the shadows where the light couldn't reach, there were several small, thumb-sized spirit stones scattered about. This was definitely a spirit stone mine that had been excavated a long time ago. It's here. Cui Hongshan looked at the Jade Slip and waved his hand. Let's sit down according to the formation we comprehended before. I will wait for Senior 2's instructions. We will stimulate our magic power and support the array formation with the disciples of Gold Spring Mountain and the other disciples. It's here? Xiao Hua almost wanted to hold his stomach and laugh out loud. This was already the depths of the Spirit Stone mine. The surrounding soil layer was extremely dense, and his divine sense couldn't reach too far. However, although he couldn't see too far, Xiao Hua would be the first to not believe that this was just a corner of the array formation, and that the disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect could transmit their magic power to the ground from here. And it's here. Cui Hongshan saw the disdain on Xiao Hua's face and secretly frowned. Then, he said arrogantly, this is just a corner of Gold Spring Mountain's defensive array formation. Naturally, it's hidden. If you don't understand, then don't say any more. We will follow Senior 2's instructions and just move. Xiao Hua saw that everyone had sat down. It was actually an ordinary array formation planning method. He blinked his eyes and flew up again. Xiao Hua, what are you doing? Cui Hongshan immediately shouted. Xiao Hua will look around. Xiao Hua didn't stop and immediately flew towards one of the passages above the cave. Chapter 2342. Cui Hongshan clenched his teeth and said in a low voice, Xiao Hua, I know that your cultivation is high and your strength is comparable to early gold core. However, this is a battle with a sword cultivator. Even a true gold core cultivator, like Senior Tu Hong, wouldn't dare to be careless. They all have to focus on the arrangement of troops, focus on the group battle, focus on the array to defend against the enemy. You have to look at the big picture. Cui Hongshan's voice became softer and softer. Because Xiao Hua had already flown away, Who could he say it to? Sigh. Chui Hongshan felt somewhat powerless. Seeing that the other 5 Imperial Thunder Sect disciples were all sitting obediently with their eyes closed, he also sighed and sat down. Chui Hongshan wanted to calm his heart and regulate his breathing. However, no matter what, he couldn't enter the ethereal state. Helpless, he could only open his eyes. However, when he opened his eyes, he almost jumped up in fright. He saw Xiao Hua's slender face swaying in front of his eyes. You? When did you return? Chui Hongshan asked in shock. I came a long time ago. Xiao Hua said weakly. I've already looked around. Don't talk about other sect disciples. There isn't even an ant. What do you think we should do? What should we do? Naturally, we should wait, Chui Hongshan said without hesitation. But this place is under the Spirit Stone Mine. It has nothing to do with the defensive array of Golden Spring Mountain. Xiao Hua said angrily. Look at the Jade Scroll yourself. Did you make a mistake? This? Chui Hongshan took out the Jade Scroll doubtfully. He looked at it again and then handed it to Xiao Hua. I didn't make a mistake. Why don't you look at it yourself? I'm not looking. Xiao Hua turned his head and said, Senior brother Minghui, look again. Chui Hongshan ignored Xiao Hua and handed the Jade Scroll to Zhen Minghui. When Zhen Minghui looked carefully, Chui Hongshan asked with interest, Xiao Hua, how do you know that this is under the Spirit Stone Mine? I just know. What about it? Xiao Hua said disdainfully. Have you been here before? Chui Hongshan narrowed his eyes and looked at Xiao Hua. Oh, what? Did Ming Mao tell you about this? Xiao Hua asked. Ming Mao never told me. But this Chui can guess. Chui Hongshan secretly despised in his heart. A rogue cultivator, as expected of a rogue cultivator. You don't have to care whether this Xiao came here or not. You, think about it. Why did Tu Hong suddenly want to transfer 3 female disciples of my Imperial Thunder sect away from Golden Spring Mountain? Furthermore, he placed us here? What are his intentions? Xiao Hua asked. Senior Tu Hong is a Golden Core cultivator, and he's in charge of Golden Spring Mountain. He is a dignified and magnanimous person. Yes, it can even be said that he has a good command over his army. He is a role model for us cultivators to emulate. Chui Hongshan held Tu Hong in high esteem and said with a smile, what could he possibly covet about the disciples of my Imperial Thunder sect? If there's anything, it's that he's taking pity on the juniors and transferring Qi Meng and the others back to Sky Patrol City. He's taking care of their lives and placing us under the Spirit Stone vein to prevent us from fighting against sword cultivators. This, Xiao Hua was also speechless. What Chui Hongshan said was indeed reasonable. He couldn't say anything to refute it. However, Xiao Hua didn't believe that Senior Tu Hong, whom he had never met before, would be so kind. Fellow Taoist Chui, is this Senior Tu your relative? Xiao Hua suddenly realized. Nonsense, Chui Hongshan said coldly. This is the first time I've seen him at Golden Spring Mountain. I've never seen him before. Furthermore, don't make any dirty guesses. Senior Tu Hong's character is noble and pure. It's not something you can measure. Xiao Hua looked at Chui Hongshan and almost thought that he was Tu Hong's illegitimate son. Junior brother Xiao. At this moment, Zhen Minghui said, Captain Chui is right. We should be waiting for orders here. All right. Xiao Hua stretched and threw a message talisman. Since you believe so much, then you can wait here. If you have any orders, fellow Taoist Chui can call me back at any time. After saying that, Xiao Hua's figure swayed and flew towards the cave entrance. What are you going to do? Chui Hongshan said anxiously as he took the message talisman. I'm sleepy. I'm going to have a wet dream. Xiao Hua's voice came from the cave entrance. This bastard, seeing Xiao Hua leave, Chui Hongshan was furious, but he also felt like he had lost something to rely on. He could only pinch the message talisman, hoping that Xiao Hua wouldn't fool him. This is clearly below the jade essence. If I hadn't passed by here before, how would I know? Xiao Hua left the cave and flew for a while. Looking at the familiar tunnel, he made a hand seal and entered the stone wall, heading towards the jade essence again. Time was tight, and the mission was difficult. Xiao Hua had to take advantage of the fact that the sword cultivators hadn't reached here and excavate as many jade essences as possible. He definitely couldn't leave any extra jade essences for the sword cultivators. This was Xiao Hua's only thought in this dangerous situation. Xiao Hua was so selfless, so considerate of the Dao sect's future. The day and night passed quickly. Everyone was working hard, whether it was the sword cultivators who were on guard in the air, the Dao sect cultivators who risked their lives to kill the blood calamity beasts, or even Xiao Hua, who was excavating selflessly. Naturally, everyone's harvest was bountiful. Less than 10% of the blood calamity beasts were left, and they were far less imposing than before. Similarly, less than 30% of the Golden Spring Mountain Forest had been destroyed by the blood calamity beasts, and a piece of flat soil was revealed from the forest. The sword cultivators understood at a glance that this place had been tampered with by the Dao sect. However, the soil was drenched in blood and flesh, and a bloody stench permeated the mountain range. Amidst this bloody stench, there was a strange sense of sorrow. Enough! Yuan Qing waved his hand and said to Li Min with satisfaction, "Take away all the blood calamity beasts in your Confusion Valley. They are the foundation of your Confusion Valley. If they're all consumed by us, what will happen to your Confusion Valley in the future?" However, Li Min shook his head and said sincerely, "Senior Yuan, I've already said that these blood calamity beasts have eaten the flesh of our warriors. They cannot be allowed to exist in this world. If Senior Yuan feels that these blood calamity beasts are no longer of any use, I will instruct my disciples to kill all these blood calamity beasts. Leave none alive." "Haha, Valley Master Li." Ing Chao laughed. "The blood calamity beasts are just stupid beasts without intelligence. How can they resist their natural appetite? Just now, your words have already made your intentions clear. We from a sword region will definitely not blame these blood calamity beasts in your Confusion Valley. Don't worry." "Yes, that's right." Yuan Qing nodded. "These blood calamity beasts are also one of the great contributors in this battle. We do not have any rewards, so those can be considered as offsetting." "Yes, I understand." Li Min nodded. "Do we need to destroy the remaining 30% of the forest?" "Yes, that's enough." Yuan Qing nodded. "Take away the blood calamity beasts." "I have other methods." "Yes." When Li Min heard that, he flew up and raised the small drum in his hand once again. Then his left and right hands hit the drum. Instantly, a sonorous and powerful drum sound that was filled with sorrow, pity, reluctance, and even determination resounded through the entire Jin Quan Mountain. It was as if he was paying tribute to the souls of the swordsmen who had passed away earlier, so that they could continue on their journey. Oh, Ing Chao's heart sank when he heard that. He looked at Li Min in confusion. He saw that Li Min was hitting the drum with a pale face and tears in his eyes. "Io." Ing Chao immediately understood and looked at Yuan Qing. As expected, Yuan Qing was also enlightened. The two of them looked at each other, and their eyes were filled with respect. They looked at the forest in front of Quanjin Mountain that had yet to be destroyed. Hundreds of blood calamity beasts sat down with the drum sound and bowed respectfully on the ground. Of the 10 blood calamity beasts that had been guarding the blood calamity beasts, there weren't many left. They leapt up from the backs of the blood calamity beasts and flew towards different blood calamity beasts. Every time they landed on a blood calamity beast, they would reach out and throw a fist-sized pill into its mouth. As each pill fell into the mouth of a blood calamity beast, that blood calamity beast would emit a low hiss and then lie down, motionless hiss. All of the swordsmen that were standing guard in the air also understood the actions of the Lost Valley. They couldn't help but feel a sense of respect in their hearts, and all of their previous thoughts vanished into thin air. Oh? Tu Hong's eyes also saw the situation on the light screen. His eyes flashed with a smile. He pointed a finger and said, "It seems that the master of these blood calamity beasts is quite tactful. If he doesn't act decisively now, then after this battle, I fear that thousands of swordsmen will come knocking on his door. If he acts decisively today, There will be some losses, but he won't have any future burdens. He will also gain the respect of others. Yes, what the general says is true. Lonexia nodded, but she was still puzzled. There's still 30% of the forest that hasn't been destroyed. Also, if my Golden Spring Mountains array formation isn't activated, then there should be several miles of earth covering it. Sword cultivators, there shouldn't be too many of them that choose to escape into the earth, right? Let's wait and see. Tu Hong waved his hand and looked back at the light screen. The sword cultivators didn't make Tu Hong wait for long. Yuan Qing stood in the air and turned to a tall old man. He smiled and said, "Old brother Jean, the rest is up to you. With Valley Master Li Min laying the groundwork, it will be much easier for my Wild Beast Villa." This old man was War Sword of Wild Beast Villa. I wouldn't dare. Li Min had already put away his small drum. He respectfully replied, "This junior has long admired Senior War Sword of Wild Beast Villa. I will wait and see." Good. War Sword clapped his hands. Your Lost Valley's Blood Calamity beasts are indeed unexpected, but how can my Wild Beast Villa allow you to monopolize the limelight? Come, take a look at the methods of my Wild Beast Villa. As he spoke, the War Sword General waved his hand. Hundreds of Wild Beast Villa disciples, who were dressed in black and had their faces covered, who had been standing in the distance, flew up and flew towards the soil that the Blood Calamity beast had destroyed. Chapter 2343. Once the hundreds of disciples had lined up, he reached into his bosom and took out a flat object which he placed in his mouth. Then, he took out a black bag from his waist. When he opened the bag, a bunch of black objects flew out from the bag. When the crowd looked carefully, they saw that they were flying objects the size of a fist. The flying object looked like a gourd. It had a small head the size of a pinky finger and a round body the size of a fist. On both sides of the body, there were two 1-inch long transparent wings. Wung wung. As the flying object flew out, the buzzing sound got louder and louder. Gradually, the pitch-black flying object had covered the entire sky above Jin Quan Mountain. Spirit swallowing bugs. Li Min was shocked. How? How is this possible? Hee, of course it's impossible. Zhang Jian laughed. If our crazy Beast Mountain Villa had so many spirit-swallowing bugs, will we need to sacrifice so many swordsmen? Yes, it's my fault. Li Min smiled apologetically. It seems that there are some differences between them and the spirit-swallowing bugs. It's more than just some differences. There's a huge difference. Zhang Jian laughed and did not explain further. He waved his hand and said, "Boy, release the earth-swallowing bugs and let them have some fun." Yes, the disciples of the crazy Beast Mountain Villa puffed up their cheeks, but no sound was heard. The so-called earth-swallowing bugs split into different groups and pounced on the ground, covering the soil densely. Earth-swallowing bugs. Li Min understood. Actually, it's nothing. The battle sword looked at Ing Chao and said with a smile, "Thousands of years ago, my Wild Beast Mountain Villa obtained a secret method. I wanted to cultivate spirit-swallowing bugs, but I didn't manage to cultivate the spirit-swallowing bugs. Instead, I cultivated some useless things that can eat soil. We call them earth-swallowing bugs. These things are really useless. After all, they're the hard work of our crazy Beast Mountain Villa for generations. We can't bear to destroy them." Previously, when we heard Senior Yuan mention that the spiritual stone mine in Jinquan Mountain was hidden underground, our Villa Master thought of this thing. "Ha! Everything has its nemesis." Ing Chao laughed and said, "Exactly. Everything in the world is bound to be restrained by something." Yuan Qing also nodded. Then, as if he had thought of something, he said in a low voice, "Senior Ing, the head of the Xuanyin sect in the country of Xi is Fairy Yingjua. Her name is the same as yours. Are you her natural nemesis? Let me see which day you've cursed me." Damn it, hearing Yuan Qing mention Fairy Yingjua for no reason, a bitter smile appeared on Ing Chao's face. "I can't wait to jinx her one day, even every day. But I can't compare to a nascent soul cultivator. That old woman sent me a message 100 years ago." "Oh, There was such a thing? Could it be that she has taken a liking to you? Yuan Qing's eyes lit up. I don't like her. Ing Chao shook his head. That old hag wants me to change my name. Huh, Yuan Qing laughed. Even Zhang Jian, Li Min, and the others couldn't help but smile. The earth-devouring insects lived up to their name. In just the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the several mu of land that was covered with spirit insects had clearly caved in. Good boy. These earth-devouring insects are actually so fierce. If these were real spirit-devouring insects, what would we do? Li Min whispered as he wiped the sweat from his forehead. Hee, brotherly. This time you've made a mistake. Zhang Jian laughed. Although these insects are innately earth-devouring insects, they aren't as fierce as you see. Oh, Li Min suddenly realized. And this is the acid that the blood calamity beast spewed out. Exactly. Zhang Jian clapped his hands. Didn't I just say it? It's all because of your Maze Valley that I'm here. General, we can only accept the challenge. Lan Xian whispered from within Gold Spring Mountain. Tell this disciple to take out the earth-firm talisman that I've been refining for many years. Tu Hong nodded as he heard this. I already knew that this day would come. The earth-firm talisman is for today. Yes. Lan Xian nodded and hurried out. Tu Hong's eyes didn't leave the light screen. Although the earth-devouring insects were fierce and had already swallowed up over a foot of the earth, Tu Hong didn't seem to panic at all. Woo! Between the layers of earth, there were flashes of brilliance. This was the sign that Gold Spring Mountain's disciples were about to attack. The sword cultivators that had been on guard all this time suddenly tightened their faces. They each urged their flying swords to attack the areas that they had already allocated. Kachacha! Instantly, the cultivators of Jin Shan sect appeared, and the flying swords of the sword cultivators also attacked. Magic tools and magic treasures clashed with each other, and following that, it was the clashing of the flesh and magic tools. The flesh and bones clashed with the flying swords. Of course, there were careful defenses, there were quick dodges, but there were sharp weapons on all sides of the body. Front and back were all ferocious. Even if one could dodge at once, how could one dodge at a second time? In just a moment, miserable screams sounded again. Everywhere, there were lives being reaped. Just as both sides were in the midst of a fierce battle, the layers of earth in the array flashed again. Hundreds of Gold Spring Mountain's disciples suddenly flew out from the array. As soon as they appeared on the battlefield, they didn't care about the other cultivators. Instead, they quickly flew towards the several acres of earth-devouring insects, without waiting for Yuan Qing and the other sword cultivators to command. The sword cultivators that were extremely close to them immediately flew up to block them. However, this group of Gold Spring Mountain's disciples didn't even bother to fight. Their bodies flew extremely fast. Both of their hands slapped their storage bags, and yellow talismans flew out. They turned into fist-sized balls of light that fell in the middle of the earth-devouring insects. Quick, block them! Yuan Qing and the others shouted. When the balls of light fell, the earth in the radius of a few feet immediately flashed with yellow brilliance. When the brilliance was slightly extinguished, it suddenly turned yellow as well. It was actually as hard as a piece of crystal. What shocked the sword cultivators the most was that when the yellow brilliance touched the earth-devouring insects also started to turn yellow. Following that, the earth-devouring insects stopped moving. It was completely similar to a fist-sized lump of earth. Not good. Zhang Jian was shocked. He anxiously transmitted his voice. The wild beast manor's disciples who were protected by the swordsmen immediately blew the soundless thing. The earth-devouring insects that weren't hit by the earth-hard talisman flapped their wings and wanted to escape. When the Gold Spring Mountain's disciples saw that the earth-hard talisman was effective, why would they let the earth-devouring insects escape? All of them waved their hands. They didn't hit the ground, but directly hit the earth-devouring insects. Hundreds and thousands of yellow light balls exploded. Hundreds and thousands of earth-devouring insects turned into lumps of earth and fell to the ground. Chapter 2344. Haha, Tu Hong sat on a chair in the cave. This was the first time he had laughed so happily since the start of the battle. The heavens are really protecting my Dao sect. The heavens are really protecting my Golden Spring Mountain. That's right, this is a lucky hit. Lon Xin also smiled. Those spirit insects seem to be of the earth attribute. Since the earth firm talisman is effective against the earth layer, then it must be even more effective against the spirit insects. General, there is no need to worry about this battle. That's right. Tu Hong smiled as he sat on a chair. He waved his hand. Let the sword cultivators madly attack the earth layer. Once they are exhausted, we will kill our way out. General's plan is flawless. This old man truly admires you. Lon Xin was sincerely convinced. Quick, quick! The battle sword above the earth layer couldn't help but fly closer. He hurriedly urged his disciples to gather the earth-devouring insects and avoid the earth-firm talismans. Then his killing intent surged, and he began to kill the closest Golden Spring Mountain disciples. However, even before these Golden Spring Mountain disciples were killed, they still threw out all of their earth-firm talismans. They completely disregarded their own lives, truly facing death with equanimity. AI, seeing the Golden Spring Mountain disciples fall one by one, and the brilliance in the air gradually extinguished, there weren't many earth-devouring insects left. The battle sword sighed and looked at Yuan Qing. Yuan Qing was also stunned. He never thought that there would be such a turn of events. The joy he had when he was teasing nascent soul cultivators had long disappeared. Fellow sword cultivators, I'm afraid there is no way to break through this earth layer today. Yuan Qing turned to the several leading illusory swordsmen to discuss. How about we temporarily withdraw our troops? Once we have some method, we can come back and kill the cultivators? That's the only way. An illusory swordsman nodded. If we swordsmen clear the earth layer, I'm afraid we will fall into the cultivator's trap. All right, Yuan Qing nodded. Just as he was about to wave his hand, he heard the fat manly Min point his finger and say in surprise, Senior Yuan, look, the spirit-devouring insects are starting to eat the earth again. No, they're starting to eat the earth that was hit by the cultivator's yellow talismans. Yuan Qing was overjoyed and looked over. Sure enough, the earth-devouring worms that were hit by the earth-sturdy talisman started to move again. They were devouring the yellow soil that was as hard as crystals. Rustle, rustle. The sound was extremely crisp. It seemed that the spirit-swallowing bugs liked it very much. The hard soil was no match for the spirit-swallowing bug's teeth. When the battle sword saw this, even he didn't know why such a mutation occurred. He could only secretly rejoice in his heart. The heavens have blessed my sword domain. Ing Chao laughed loudly. That's right, the heavens are really protecting our sword region. The swordsmen all laughed. Meanwhile, Tu Hong's expression had turned extremely ugly. How is that possible? The earth beneath the earth-firm talisman is even harder than a top-grade crystal stone. Lon Xin whispered, her face ashen. Everything has its vanquisher. Tu Hong sighed dejectedly. Of course, everything had to be subdued. What Xiao Hua wanted to subdue was naturally the jade marrow. In order to not leave behind any jade marrow for the sword cultivators, Xiao Hua had worked very hard and diligently for nearly 2 days. His heart began to whisper to himself, Damn it, I feel like something is wrong. If Cui Hong Shun is Tu Hong's illegitimate son, then I can understand this arrangement. Otherwise, there would never be a meat pie that would fall from the sky. This young master will go and take a look. Xiao Hua put away the wishful staff and used a concealment technique to return to where Cui Hong Shun and the others were meditating. The 6 idiots were still sitting there obediently. Cui Hong Shun didn't dare to put away his captain's token into his storage bag. Instead, he held it in his hands, looking at it from time to time for fear that he would delay the attack. Following the rules, Xiao Hua sneered disdainfully. The disciples of the cultivation families are all so inflexible. It's no wonder that it's not easy for them to become characters that can stand proudly on the Dawn Rain continent. Chui Hongshun, if you're like this, then your bullshit dream. I'm afraid it will really be a dream. Then, without a word, Xiao Hua fled towards the direction he had come from. Although Xiao Hua's memory wasn't very good, after searching for half an hour, he still found the tunnel he had come from. However, at this time, the tunnel had been sealed, and a layer of solid restriction had firmly sealed the entrance of the cave. Xiao Hua's divine sense swept through the restriction, and a trace of surprise appeared on his face. This restriction was very strange. Not only was it thick, but also absorbed divine sense. Even the spiritual power fluctuations of the restriction were extremely unstable. TCH, which cultivator laid this down? It's really rough. Xiaohua was somewhat disdainful. With a wave of his hand, he took out the rabbit talisman and was about to insert it into the array. However, when his first talisman touched the array, an earthy yellow brilliance immediately flashed, and an extremely slight explosion burst out from the array, like a fried soybean. Looking at the spiritual power fluctuations, it was like pouring water on oil, making a sizzling sound. Ouch! Xiaohua was shocked. He didn't dare to try again and immediately took back the talisman. It wasn't until the time it took to eat a meal that the spiritual power fluctuations gradually calmed down. Good boy, is the level of the cultivator who laid this array higher than this master or lower than this master? Xiaohua pinched his chin and was somewhat pensive. This array was the defensive array of Jin Quan Mountain. And at this time, the cultivators of Jin Quan Mountain were fighting with the swordsmen of Huan Country. Perhaps it was a cruel battle above. How could Xiao Hua dare to carelessly destroy it? If he wasn't careful, he would become the eternal sinner of the Dao sect, right? This is difficult. Xiao Hua shook his head and turned around to look at the surface of the earth. Sure enough, it was as he had expected. The area around him was filled with this kind of extremely unstable formation. Xiao Hua frowned and no longer flew upwards. He also didn't check other places and returned to the place where Chui Hongshun and the others were resting. Seeing Xiao Hua return, Chui Hongshun's heart inexplicably calmed down, but his face was still indifferent. He looked up and down at Xiao Hua, not even greeting him. Get up! Xiao Hua flew in front of everyone and shouted. This Xiao found some problems. Oh! Everyone was surprised and hurriedly got up. Zhen Minghui glanced at Chui Hongshun and turned to ask Xiao Hua, Junior brother Xiao, what did you find? We are trapped in an array. Xiao Hua glanced at everyone and said, This array seems to be very big. This Xiao didn't have the time to examine it carefully, but it seems that there is only one team of Imperial Thunder Sect disciples here. Everyone was stunned when they heard this. Fellow Chui, what is your relationship with Tu Hong? Xiao Hua looked up and down at Chui Hongshun and asked with bad intentions. What relationship? Chui Hongshun frowned and said curiously, You have already asked this question before, and this Chui has also answered it. Strange. Xiao Hua scratched his head and pointed at Zhen Minghui. Senior brother Minghui, go to the east side and see if there are any other teams of disciples. And this Zhen will go over now. Zhen Minghui saw Xiao Hua's serious expression and didn't dare to be negligent. This time, he didn't even look at Chui Hongshun and cupped his hands and said. When Zhen Minghui turned around, Xiao Hua ordered again, Senior brother Su, Senior brother Qiu, don't be idle. Take Zhen Hua and Bai Su Gu to the west side and other places. Yes. Su Qing and Qiu Su didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly waved their hands to take the two Qi refinement disciples. Unexpectedly, Chui Hongshun anxiously said, Wait a moment. Su Qing and the others' eyes quickly turned, their gazes frequently moving between Xiao Hua and Chui Hongshun. Why don't you go? Chui Hongshun asked Xiao Hua. AI, this Xiao was born with a bad sense of direction. Xiao Hua sighed and shrugged. Moreover, this Xiao has an important matter to do. What matter? Chui Hongshun asked. Naturally, it is a mission to minimize the losses of my Dao sect. You won't understand, even if I tell you. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, Yes, Chui Hongshan nodded and turned his head. This Chui will go to the north. You all follow Xiao Hua's instructions and go to the west and south. Then he threw the captain's token to Xiao Hua and said, You stay here and guard the left side. If there are any abnormalities on the token, quickly send a communication talisman, or act according to the previous arrangements. Yes. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and took the token. He was also afraid that something would really happen. If he was here, he would be far more important than these 6 idiots. However, after watching the 6 people leave, Xiao Hua only sat quietly for a moment. It was as if there were sores growing under his, but the temptation of the jade essence was really too great. Forget it. Let's go and mine the jade essence. Xiao Hua got up and fled again. As long as I am within the formation, the token will react. When the time comes, this young master will come back again. Not to mention the discovery of the Imperial Thunder Sect's first team, the earth-devouring worms that were hit by the Earth-Hard Talisman on the Quanjin Mountain Stratum became even more ferocious. Not only did they easily devour the soil that was as hard as crystals, even the speed at which they devoured ordinary soil was more than twice as fast. In just half a day's time, 100 zhang deep hole had already appeared in the soil stratum. Ha ha, cultivators really go for wool and come home shorn. Yuan Qing laughed loudly. Not only did they not use the talisman to kill our spiritual worms, they even helped our spiritual worms mutate. What made this old man the happiest was that their Quanji Mountain's disciples lost quite a few again. Ha ha ha, that's exactly the case. Battlesword also laughed loudly at the side. Even this old man did not expect that this cultivator's talisman would actually have an effect on the earth-devouring worms. In the future, this old man still has to try more. Who knows, maybe I can cultivate the spirit-devouring worms. Battle Sword Friend, can your earth-devouring worms rest for a while? Ing Chao reminded. If you want to pull the cultivator out from the ground, these earth-devouring worms are a strong aid. You can't kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. Yes, this junior understands. Battle Sword nodded. In another hour, we will let the earth-devouring worms rest. Yes. Ing Chao nodded slightly and said to Yuan Qing, If the earth-devouring worms rest, we sword cultivators should not be idle. Let's all exercise our hands and feet. Consecutive sword formation. All right. Yuan Qing clapped his hands and said, This old man has been feeling a little lonely for the past half a day. Let's use the flying sword too. Chapter 2345. Sure enough, an hour later, after the disciples of the Wild Beast Villa had collected the earth-devouring insects, the sword cultivators once again split into 2 groups. One group still stood on their swords and guarded in midair, while the other group formed into a formation and attacked the 300-meter-wide black hole. Several hundred sword cultivators with similar sword equipment each took out their flying swords. As the flying swords flew through the air, the similar sword intents on the flying swords resonated with each other, and the several hundred flying swords gradually condensed into a single massive flying sword. Wung wung, the humming of swords emitted from the massive flying sword. It was actually a cultivator's magic weapon. All sorts of heaven and earth spiritual energy began to rapidly surge forth, filling up the gaps between the small flying swords. Go! Several hundred sword cultivators moved their minds, all of them simultaneously chanting the same sword chant. The massive flying swords slowly began to move, and a multicolored sword light condensed into a massive sword light that pierced straight into the black hole. Whoa! The flying sword seemed to tear the air apart. When it entered the black hole, it gave rise to a strange sound of wind whistling. Its power was extremely great. Bang! With a loud explosion, countless clouds of dust burst out from the black hole, shooting straight up into the sky. However, as the winter wind blew, all of this dust was blown away, turning into dust that drifted between the heavens and earth. Oh my God! Seeing the several hundred sword cultivators on the light screen, Juan Exine couldn't help but cry out, This This is simply the cultivation of swords. Humph. At most, it's just a little bit closer to the realm of swords. Tu Hong sneered. If their array formation really had the strength to transform into swords, then who would want to fight them? Yes, this old man understands. Lon Exine smiled. It's just that seeing such a fierce sword array for the first time make me a bit nervous. Tu Hong did not express his opinion. He only squinted his eyes as he watched the swordsmen keep their flying swords and slowly form their formation again. He said faintly, "These flying swords look very powerful, but they are useless." Which cultivator would directly face these several hundred swordsmen as an enemy? Even a cultivator whose strength is comparable to a third-grade illusory sword cultivator wouldn't allow them to easily form their sword array. If it were the many cultivators of my Dao sect, would they have the time to form a sword array? It's only because my Jinquan Mountains array is underground that they are wasting their sword origin for no reason. On top of that, you are strutting around in front of my Golden Spring Mountain. They're just a fox using a tiger's might to intimidate others. Tu Hong sneered. If old Brother Lon goes out, they'll definitely be scared witless. I dare not. I dare not. There must be an illusory swordsman beside the sword cultivator. This old man is no match for him. Lon Xin was very humble. She asked, should we take advantage of this time and give them a head-on blow? Wait a little longer. Tu Hong only said 2 words before falling silent. As Lon Xin saw this, she could only stand there in silence, quietly watching this sword cultivator show off his might. He knew in his heart that his cultivation couldn't compare with Tu Hong's, and he was even more inferior to Tu Hong's when it came to commanding troops. In a battle where hundreds of people would die, he really couldn't deal with it. Seeing the numerous swordsmen fly out one after another, and the black hole being struck down several hundred feet, Yuan Qing also laughed out loud. He flew up and loudly shouted, "All of you retreat. Let this old man move his hands and feet." Yes. The swordsmen who had just put away their flying swords and were about to use them again hurriedly agreed and scattered to the side. Yuan Qing flew up into the air. He pointed a finger, and the flying sword beneath his feet shot up into the air. Puff! Yuan Qing opened his mouth, and a sword origin shot out, quickly catching up with the flying sword. With a so sound, the flying sword suddenly accelerated, and a small spark flashed from the flying sword. The spark became increasingly hot, gradually expanding. In an instant, the flying sword flew up several dozen feet, and the spark had already turned into a fireball. However, this wasn't the end. The flying sword continued to fly up into the air. The bird cultivators in the air scattered, creating a large gap. Then, the flying sword suddenly burst apart, turning into a giant fireball. Speed, Yuan Qing's hands formed a sword seal, and he casually pointed his finger. His expression seemed relaxed, but there was a dignified look in his eyes. Wung, wung, the sound of a sword humming came from the flying sword of a nearby swordsman. Looking at the fireball in the air, it was like a meteor, but also like a blazing sun falling from the heavens. It cut across the horizon, emitting a loud, rumbling sound as it smashed into the black hole. Now's the time. Tu Hong and Lon Xin were also watching Yuan Qing show off. Just as Lon Xin was dumbfounded by the might of this flying sword, Tu Hong suddenly shouted out. Oh, Lon Xin was stunned, as if she hadn't reacted yet. Tu Hong's lips curved up in a smile. He pointed his finger at the triangular magic tool, and at the same time, his figure also flew out. On the ground, a little further away from the black hole, there was a faint flash of light. At this time, many sword cultivators were scattered in the air, smiles hanging on their faces as they watched Yuan Qing display his skills. No one thought that Tu Hong would suddenly attack the illusory swordsman while he was displaying his power. And Yuan Qing's attention was also on the flying sword. When a meteor-like flying sword smashed into the black hole, a burst of battle cries resounded through Gold Spring Mountain. Boom! There was an earth-shattering tremor. The entire ground was shaking. This boom was not only from Yuan Qing's flying sword, but also the sound of thousands of ambushing cultivators' artifacts and treasures hitting the sword cultivator's body. The sword cultivators were obviously caught off guard. As soon as they came into contact with the flying sword, over a dozen sword cultivators were struck by their magic tools, and their bodies fell from the sky. Damn it, Yuan Qing had already noticed the commotion when the flying sword fell. But his sword seal had already been formed, and he couldn't stop the flying sword, so he had no choice but to drive the flying sword into the black hole. Seeing the sword cultivators fall, he flew into a rage out of humiliation. He pointed his finger, and the blazing sun once again flew out from the black hole, piercing straight towards the many Foundation establishment cultivators. The intense sword light was like a glaring sun as it struck the cultivators. Not to mention the cultivators fighting back. They couldn't even open their eyes. Yuan Qing, your opponent is this general. A roar sounded from the ground. A yellow light flashed, and Tu Hong's figure appeared in the air. Oh! Yuan Qing heard a cultivator call out his name. He was surprised, but he didn't withdraw the sword seal in his hand. Go! Tu Hong waved his hand, and the serpent spear he was holding in his hand flew into the air. Roar! The serpent spear whistled through the air, and it actually transformed into a yellow serpent that charged towards the scorching sun. The bloody snake opened its mouth wide, as if it wanted to swallow the blazing sun in one gulp. Chapter 2346. Ha! So you are the golden core cultivator from Golden Spring Mountain. Yuan Qing laughed as he activated his sword art and said, You actually managed to find out my name. Seems like you want to have a taste of my power. Woo, the huge python circled in the air, and a large amount of earth attribute spiritual energy quickly condensed, blocking many cultivators under its body. The huge mouth swallowed the sun into its stomach. Instantly, the entire battlefield dimmed, and the screams of the sword cultivators and cultivators seemed to have weakened. However, Tu Hong's face was still grim, while Yuan Qing's face was calm, which was thought-provoking. Tu Hong activated his magic power, and while controlling his magic treasure, he quickly released his spiritual sense to scanning Chao and the rest. However, when his spiritual sense scanned Ling Yunwu and the other illusory swordsman, his face changed. Maybe it was because of his shock that his state of mind was disturbed, or maybe it was because his magic power was not enough to suppress Yuan Qing's flying sword. Yuan Qing slightly raised his sword art and shouted, Break! Numerous light rays faintly penetrated the body of the huge yellow python, following which the number of light rays increased rapidly, and the huge python's abdomen expanded rapidly. With a loud pung, a scorching aura was emitted from the huge python. The flying sword actually broke through the huge python's encirclement and rushed out. Furthermore, the flying sword did not seem to stop. It rapidly expanded and contracted a few times and immediately turned into a fiery red stream of light and pierced towards Tu Hong. This time, the flying sword was different from the previous one. It did not have much power, and only countless sparks could be seen from the stream of light. However, Tu Hong, who was in the middle of the battle, did not have a relaxed expression on his face. A huge pressure appeared in the air, and when Tu Hong scanned the flying sword with his divine sense, he could feel the powerful force contained within the flying sword. He did not dare to slack off. The attack power of a sword cultivator was not a joke, not to mention the flying sword of an illusory sword cultivator. Go! Tu Hong waved his hand, and the magic treasure which had already reverted back to its spear form drew an arc in the air and stabbed towards the flying sword. With a loud kung, the spear and the flying sword collided, and countless sparks splashed out. An unpleasant screeching sound came from the point of collision between the spear and the flying sword, rapidly spreading to the entire battlefield. Nearly a dozen cultivators and swordsmen couldn't bear the ear-piercing sound and fell from the sky one after another. The flying sword looked like a fireball that had been doused with water, floating in the air dimly. Tu Hong's spear also flipped a few times in the air, floating at a slanted angle to the side. You also know sword cultivation? A trace of surprise flashed across Yuan Qing's eyes as he asked. Then, he looked at Tu Hong's martial attire and said thoughtfully, "Even if you have never practiced flying swords, you are still somewhat related to my sword domain." Sword cultivators are indeed arrogant. You guys are too conceited. Could it be that the flying swords of my Dao sect are inferior to the flying swords of your swordsmen? Can I, too, know a little bit about flying sword techniques? Tu Hong laughed coldly. If a cultivator from my Dao sect used a flying sword to kill a swordsman from sword cultivator, would you say that he was definitely a swordsman from sword cultivator? All flows return to origin. It is said that no matter if it is a cultivator or a swordsman, they are all the same in the immortal realm. Your knowledge is not bad. Yuan Qing still had a strong attitude and asked again, "Since you know that I am Yuan Qing, why don't you report your name?" When two armies are facing each other, knowing the enemy and knowing yourself will ensure victory. Tu Hong laughed coldly. You sword cultivators have besieged my Golden Spring Mountain for many days and have already investigated the situation on my Golden Spring Mountain. How is it possible that you don't even know my name? When Yuan Qing heard this, his face turned red. He really didn't think so much. Your father will kill you. Why would I care who you are? Yuan Qing waved his hand, and the flying sword landed in his hand. An illusory swordsman is only SOSO. Tu Hong naturally wouldn't back down. Then this old man will let you see what a real illusory sword is. Yuan Qing laughed loudly, and his body slowly flew up. He activated the true Yuan in his body, and a brilliant sword light shot out from Yuan Qing's body. An unusually hot sword essence rushed out uncontrollably. At this moment, Li Min and Ning Chao, who were the closest to Yuan Qing, couldn't bear it and hurriedly flew back. They only stopped after flying back a few hundred feet. Yuan Qing's body emitted flames which heated up the surrounding air. The sword light followed the flames and rushed into the long sword in his hand. Hence, the flying sword became even brighter and gradually elongated. At the same time, as the flying sword elongated, Yuan Qing's body started to turn illusory and elongated. He seemed to be fusing with the flying sword. Seeing such a situation, how could Tu Hong wait any longer? He waved his hand and activated his true Yuan. The long spear once again turned into a giant python and rushed towards Yuan Qing. At the same time, Tu Hong's hands formed seals again, and the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth condensed around him. It was another familiar sword hum. However, this sword hum was getting louder and louder. When it reached its peak, Yuan Qing's flying sword fused with his arms, and his figure was faintly switching between a sword and a human form. At this moment, Tu Hong's long spear was already in front of him. There was a faint stench coming from the bloody snake's mouth. Yuan Qing raised his arms slightly, and the long sword drew a line in the air. It seemed slow, but in reality, it was very fast. In an instant, it reached the mouth of the long spear first. Clang! Once again, there was a collision sound. However, unlike before, when the long spear collided with the long sword, it immediately split into three. The three shadows bypassed the flying sword and rushed towards Yuan Qing. Your Taoist sect likes to play with such superficial things. Yuan Qing's voice was as sonorous as gold and stone. Then, the long sword split into three rays of sword light that were even faster than the long spear. In an instant, they hit the giant python's shadow. However, at this moment, something strange happened again. Hundreds of earth spikes suddenly shot out from the mountain where Yuan Qing was. These earth spikes rushed into the air, and the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth also condensed into a part of the earth spikes. They were all aimed at Yuan Qing's legs at an extremely fast speed. You do have some tricks up your sleeve. Yuan Qing was slightly stunned. He hurriedly waved his hand, and a few more rays of sword light flew over. Swoosh, 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 they cut off the earth spikes. They were extremely sharp. However, as soon as the sword light flashed, countless spikes suddenly appeared in the space several feet around Yuan Qing like branches and vines, closing in on Yuan Qing's body. Yuan Qing was a little surprised. It was easy to cut off the earth spikes horizontally. However, the sharp spikes were shining with a dark light. They were not easy to deal with. Yuan Qing did not dare to be careless. Sword light flowed around his body, and his figure gradually disappeared. He turned into a long sword that pointed to the sky. Crack! The earth spikes quickly spread out and quickly covered Yuan Qing. Then they suddenly closed up and tightly wrapped around Yuan Qing. However, Ing Chao and the others watched from afar and had no intention of helping. Spike! Tu Hong's face flashed with a hint of savagery. He grabbed at the compressed earth spikes and was about to activate his Dharma power again. At this moment, a sharp ray of sword light suddenly shot out from the yellow earth spikes. It slashed through the earth spikes, and a flying sword flew out from the earth spikes. Ha ha ha! Yuan Qing's maniacal laughter came from the flying sword. Then, his body could no longer maintain the sword form. A few rays of sword light flashed and appeared. How can a Taoist sect know about my sword cultivator's Dharma power? Yuan Qing raised his eyebrows and said, "Your Dharma power is indeed powerful. However, against a sword cultivator like me, it's just a small trick." "Is that so?" Tu Hong sneered. He suddenly waved his other hand that had been hidden in his Taoist robe. A wave of spiritual power suddenly trembled around Tu Hong. This is? Yuan Qing was stunned. His eyes flashed as he saw the remains of the 6 long spears that he had cut in half earlier surrounding him. Rumble. As soon as Yuan Qing saw the remains of the spear, the 6 spear remains began to shine with a bright yellow light and exploded like fireworks. An extremely strong tearing force rushed toward Yuan Qing's body. This is bad. Seeing Tu Hong explode his Dharma treasure, Yuan Qing was shocked. He quickly flew up and tried to escape. However, he was still too slow. The 6 forces tore at his body like 6 large hands and threw him high into the sky. What scared Yuan Qing the most was that he had barely dodged the 6 forces. The spikes that he had broken free from earlier were also ignited by the Dharma treasure. An even stronger explosive force rushed toward him. Yuan Qing was shocked. He could no longer hold back. He opened his mouth and a blood-red ray of sword light flew out. It was like a shooting star that pierced toward the exploding spikes. It was extremely strange. When the ray of sword light pierced through, it was as if it had pierced through a pocket. The exploding spikes suddenly deflated and shrank toward the spot where the ray of sword light had pierced through. Then they disappeared. The small sword that had pierced through the exploding spikes had also become much dimmer. "Ha ha! Yuan Qing, you old thief! How's my technique?" Tu Hong laughed loudly. Then his body flashed with earth yellow light again. His body landed on the ground and disappeared. At the same time, many other Dao sect cultivators also left the battlefield and landed on the ground. They also disappeared like Tu Hong. Wong Wong. A loud sword hum sounded and a fiery red ray of sword light flashed. Yuan Qing transformed into a long sword and slashed at the spot where Tu Hong had disappeared. Boom, boom, boom. A huge crack that was dozens of feet deep appeared on the ground. When the long sword transformed back into Yuan Qing's human form, his face turned pale. Despicable brat. Yuan Qing's eyes were wide open as he stood in midair. The long sword in his hand was like a rainbow as he shouted loudly. Yes, Yuan Qing was a 3rd-grade illusory swordsman. His strength was comparable to a late-stage Golden Core realm cultivator. In terms of attack power, he was even stronger than a late-stage Golden Core realm cultivator. Previously, when he used the flying sword, his strength was definitely not something that Tu Hong could compare to. However, Tu Hong made use of the flying sword divine ability that he had just used to attack him. Then, he used the exploding spikes and the explosion of his magic treasure to trap Yuan Qing. Although Yuan Qing did not suffer any serious injuries and only suffered some minor injuries due to the depletion of his sword origin, but when he thought about it, Tu Hong was only at the peak of the early-stage Golden Core realm. He had not even reached the mid-stage Golden Core realm. Yuan Qing's face was really a big loss. Chapter 23:47. Haha, sword friend Yuan Qing. Ing Chao flew over and said with a smile, "This cultivator, named Tu from Jinquan Mountain, is really sinister. He actually took advantage of the fact that you just used up your sword origin to launch a sneak attack. It's normal that you couldn't kill him." Hearing Ing Chao mention Tu Hong's death, Yuan Qing's face turned red. To be honest, he really did look down on Tu Hong and wanted to play with him. He wanted to show off the power of the skyscraping sword sect in front of so many sword cultivators and bird cultivators, and vent the anger of the sword cultivators who lost their lives over the past few days. But everything seemed to be out of his expectations. Sigh, I have still underestimated this Dao sect cultivator. Yuan Qing was helpless and could only sigh and admit, they definitely can't beat us sword cultivators in terms of fighting, but their mysterious secret techniques and spells are really troublesome. That's right. Ling Yunwu also flew over and said with a smile, "If not, how could a thunder-controlling sect disciple pretend to be a foundation establishment cultivator? How? How could a group of sword cultivators be intimidated? If not, how could I invite more than 10 illusory swordsmen to deal with this thunder-controlling sect disciple?" Yuan Qing seemed to empathize with him and immediately sympathized with Ling Yunwu. He asked again, "That golden core cultivator wasn't the one you were looking for, right?" "No." Ling Yunwu shook his head. This person was dressed in martial attire and called himself a cultivator from Jinquan Mountain. He's not a thunder-controlling sect disciple. Also, I've observed for a long time, none of the Dao sect disciples that appeared were wearing the thunder-controlling sect uniform. "How's the damage just now?" Yuan Qing glanced at Ing Chao and asked in a low voice. "I've asked the disciples in the sky to do some calculations. The Dao sect cultivator's sneak attack just now killed about 230 warriors of the sword domain." Ing Chao also replied in a low voice. Also, the Dao sect cultivator was prepared. This time, only 70 cultivator corpses were left. Yuan Qing let out a long sigh. He looked at the deep pit and said coldly, "Valley Masterly, how's your earth-devouring bug?" "Okay, Senior Yuan, we still have to wait for another 2 hours." Li Min hurriedly replied, "All right, brave warriors of Sword Region, continue to vent your anger on the cultivators underground." Yuan Qing waved his hand and said, "This time, the Dao sect cultivators will definitely not dare to launch a sneak attack." Yes. The sword cultivators were already burning with rage after being ambushed by the cultivators. When they heard Yuan Qing's command, they cheered loudly and rearranged their formation to attack the black hole. Inside the Golden Spring Mountain, Tu Hong's face was covered in a layer of faint golden color. He was sitting on a chair and adjusting his breath. A layer of yellow brilliance was flowing around his body, emitting a faint glow. Lon Xian looked at him for a moment and then quietly walked out. After an hour, Lon Xian quietly returned once more. Tu Hong had already returned to his original appearance. General, Lon Xian glanced at the light screen above the magic tool and whispered, "Those strange spirit insects have been released again. Let's hold on for now." Tu Hong sighed and waved his hand. "The cultivators of my Golden Spring Mountain are far too weak compared to the swordsmen. Let's gather our strength first and wait for the final battle." "General, for you to injure that illusory sword cultivator is already commendable. There is no need to blame yourself." Lon Xian misunderstood and quickly comforted him. "Haha, old brother Lon." Tu Hong waved his hand and smiled. "Although that Yuan Qing's cultivation is at the late Golden Core stage, I really made him eat a loss just now. Although I had to abandon my magic tool and was only slightly injured, Yuan Qing's injuries are definitely worse than mine. To be able to make a late golden core swordsman fall under my hands. Even if I die, I will still be happy. This old man was also frightened just now. Lon Exine didn't hide her feelings and smiled apologetically. Tu Hong pointed at the light screen and said, "Not only are the disciples of my Golden Spring Mountain inferior to the sword cultivators outside, but the high-level disciples are also inferior. Look here where the light screen cannot see. There are dozens of illusory swordsmen standing there. None of them are inferior to Yuan Qing." Dozens of illusory swordsmen? Lon Xin was dumbfounded. How could a sword cultivator invest so many illusory swords in my Golden Spring Mountain? This doesn't make sense. Who knows? Tu Hong didn't lose his composure like Lon Xin. He coldly said, "The more they come, the happier I will be." "General," Lon Xin hesitated for a moment, hesitating. "What's wrong?" Tu Hong curiously asked. "Does old brother Lon have something to say?" "The cultivators of the Dao sect, they have something to say," Lon Xin whispered. "If General hadn't decisively killed a Golden Spring Mountain disciple last time, I'm afraid they would have come knocking on our door. These damned cultivators." Tu Hong gnashed his teeth. "They claim to be the orthodox disciples of the Dao sect. They don't even place my Sky Patrol city in their eyes. What do they know about deploying troops? What do they know about the Tao of illusions?" "That's right." Lon Xin bitterly smiled. "They say that my Golden Spring Mountain has too few disciples and that they're all hiding somewhere, so they have to go out and risk their lives." Hearing this, Tu Hong wasn't angry. Instead, he smiled and said, "These disciples of the Tao sect are quite smart. That's enough. Tell them to cultivate in seclusion." In a few days, that sword cultivator spirit insects will swallow up the earth layer into the defensive array formation. At that time, we will have our final battle. If we are not their match, then we will abandon this Golden Spring Mountain Spirit Stone Mine. "That's not good," Lon Xin whispered. "Weakening our morale without fighting is not the way to win. Moreover, if those Dao sect cultivators hear this, won't they all run away?" This old man wants them to run away. But do you think those sword cultivators will agree?" Tu Hong sneered. "If they want to live, then their only choice is to desperately kill the enemy." "Yes, this old man understands." Lon Xin nodded and turned to leave. Looking at Lon Xion's back, Tu Hong's eyes fell on the light screen. He frowned, thinking to himself, how come there are suddenly over a dozen illusory swordsmen? These illusory swordsmen don't seem to be from the sword faction that is responsible for this area. What are they doing here? That's right. Even if Tu Hong cracked his head, he still wouldn't know that these illusory swordsmen had come for Xiao Hua, who is still at the bottom of the Spirit Stone Mine. How is it? Several days passed. Seeing that there was no movement from the captain's token, Xiao Hua had no choice but to come out and take a look. At this time, Cui Hongshun and the others had already returned. Xiao Hua looked at their grim expressions and asked in a low voice, "Good, junior apprentice brother Xiao knows." Zhenming Wei said, "We've looked all around, and it really is the same as junior apprentice brother said. There isn't a single cultivator here. There isn't any movement at all." Chapter 2348. I also tried to send a transmission talisman to Feng Yuan and the others, but there was no response. Cui Hongshan's expression was somewhat abnormal, but it wasn't as ugly as Zhen Minghui and the others. He said, "It seems we are trapped in a formation. It's good that you know. Do you have any ideas?" Xiao Hua returned the captain's token to Cui Hongshan and asked, "Actually, there's no need for any good ideas." Cui Hongshan squeezed out a smile and said, "Maybe Senior Tu Hong has other arrangements. We have other important matters to attend to here. Are you sure you can send your magic power into the formation?" Xiao Hua couldn't help but mock. "In any case, I am confident I don't have this ability." How could Cui Hongshan not hear Xiao Hua's mockery? He said angrily, "I know your cultivation is deeper than mine, but you don't need to remind me all the time, right? Senior Tu Hong is a senior expert, the commander of the army, He definitely has his reasons for arranging us here. Even if there are some mistakes, I'm afraid it is unintentional. As for the intention to harm others that you are projecting, he definitely won't have it. How do you know? Is Tu Hong Chui Hong? Xiaohua asked. Some people don't need to be understood. Chui Hongshan sneered. You only need to look at these people, and you will admire them from the bottom of your heart, and obey them from the bottom of your heart. This is where the charm of a person lies. Although this Chui has only met Senior Tu Hong a few times from the first time this Chui saw him, I knew that this was the kind of person he was. He is someone I can entrust my life to. Good boy. You are really amazing. Xiao Hua smacked his lips and sneered. You don't even recognize this Xiao as your senior brother from the same sect, and you don't even care about this Xiao saving your life. You dare to entrust your life to someone you've never met before? Humph. My life was saved by you. You can take it away at any time if you want. Chui Hongshan didn't show any weakness, but you can't control my thoughts. Could it be that you've never met such a person? You only met once, and you can treat each other with sincerity? This. Xiao Hua was at a loss. There was Fairy Hong Xia. He only met her once, and their hearts were connected. The second time they met, the third time, damn it, it was even more excessive. Where's the guy? Naturally, it was Ziyi. It was a very strange feeling. Although Xiao Hua might not dare to entrust his life to Ziyi, the power of his trust was undeniable. All right, your eloquence can't be said. It's much stronger than your cultivation. This Xiao won't compete with you in this. Xiao Hua didn't admit it. He pointed his hand and said, Zhenhua, come here. Oh yes, martial uncle Xiao. Zhenhua said respectfully. At this moment, he held this martial uncle Xiao in high esteem. Not to mention that Xiao Hua's cultivation was so profound that it made him dizzy. Just the fact that Xiao Hua didn't put in much effort, and there were already a lot of good things in his storage bag, was enough to make him obediently listen to Xiao Hua. Come with me. Xiao Hua turned around and left. Yes. Zhenhua didn't dare to delay and hurriedly followed. After more than half a day, Xiao Hua brought Zhenhua back again. Looking at Zhenhua's baffled appearance, Chui Hongshan was also baffled. He raised his eyes and asked, Xiao Hua, in this gourd of yours, what kind of medicine did you buy? If you want to live, then listen to this, Xiao. Xiao Hua was too lazy to explain to him. If you have anything you're curious about, just ask him. After saying that, he flew away again without stopping. Zhenhua, what did he do to you? Chui Hongshan asked curiously. This disciple also doesn't know. Zhenhua was extremely bewildered. Martial Uncle Xiao only called this disciple out. Then, this disciple's vision turned black, and I didn't know anything. After waking up, Martial Uncle Xiao kept asking this disciple, how do you feel? How's the true qi in your body? Your cultivation hasn't changed, right? And other such extremely strange questions. And then, Chui Hongshan asked. And then? Then Martial Uncle Xiao brought this disciple back. Zhenhua was also puzzled. How long has it been? You don't know what happened? Bai Sugu asked in surprise. Half a day. Zhenhua scratched his head and smiled apologetically. This disciple's vision indeed turned black, and I don't know anything. Then, did your cultivation change? Zhen Minghui came to his senses and hurriedly asked. No, this disciple exercised his mental cultivation method. After checking for a long time, I didn't find any abnormalities. Zhenhua said very decisively. Zhen Minghui looked at Chui Hongshan. The two of them were a little dumbfounded. They really couldn't think of what Xiao Hua did to Zhenhua. Forget it. Su Qing waved her hand and said, Anyway, junior brother Xiao won't harm us. Let's just listen to his arrangements. What else could they do? Chui Hongshan was dejected and sat on the ground. Looking at the unresponsive captain's token in his hand, his eyes were dull. He really didn't know what to do. But at this moment, the captain's token emitted a faint spiritual energy fluctuation. Chui Hongshan rubbed his eyes in disbelief and hurriedly shouted, Xiao Hua, quickly look, the captain's token has reacted. Senior Tu Hong ordered us to attack. Xiao Hua, quickly, send a message to Xiao Hua. Chui Hongshun hurriedly ordered Zhen Minghui. Let him come and see. Senior Tu Hong definitely didn't lie to us. Chui Hongshun seemed to have grabbed onto a life-saving straw. Yes. Zhen Minghui hurriedly sent out the communication talisman. When Xiao Hua returned, Chui Hongshun handed the captain's token to him as if he was presenting a treasure and said, "Take a look. Senior Tu Hong has issued an order for us to attack." "Oh, attack from here?" Xiao Hua was obviously stunned and somewhat didn't dare to believe it. This seems a little inappropriate. Chui Hongshan released his divine sense and didn't see any formation, so he hesitated and said, "Then, can we fly a little higher?" Zhen Minghui's brain was active, and he immediately asked, "Then, let's go up and take a look." Chui Hongshan nodded. "The closer we are to the formation, the more we can activate our magic power defense." "Okay." Xiao Hua could only agree and nod. Seeing that Xiao Hua was the same, everyone flew out of the cave. Under Chui Hongshan's lead, they flew up the path that Chui Hongshan had previously explored. After flying for an hour, Chui Hongshan's captain's token suddenly emitted a strong spiritual energy fluctuation. Then, a fluctuation that was 100 times stronger swept across the captain's token and swept across everyone's body. "Oh!" Xiao Hua was stunned and hurriedly released his divine sense. Previously, his divine sense couldn't reach far because it was blocked by the special layer of soil of Mount Quanjin. But now, without any obstruction, it swept out in an instant. Xiao Hua's expression changed greatly, and he shouted, "Chui Hongshan, you are. Forget it. Do you still want to live?" Why is that?" Chui Hongshan was also flustered. Just as he was about to sweep his divine sense out, who knew that before his divine sense could leave his body, dozens of divine senses swept over like sharp swords and locked onto everyone in an instant. And after the dozens of divine senses, there were even hundreds of divine senses following behind. "Yes," everyone said without hesitation. "Okay," Xiao Hua also nodded. He hurriedly stretched out his hand and untied a spirit storage pouch from his waist. He reached out and grabbed the back of Chui Hongshan's neck. His thumb pinched the back of Chui Hongshan's neck, and Chui Hongshan fainted. Xiao Hua threw Chui Hongshan into the spirit storage pouch, no different from throwing a little duck. This! Zhen Minghui and the rest opened their eyes wide. They finally understood why Zhen Hua had been unconscious for half a day and why Xiao Hua asked if Zhen Hua was injured. "Damn it, do you still want to live? Quickly come over," Xiao Hua shouted and waved his hand again. Zhen Hua fell into his hand without any strength to fight back and was thrown into the spirit storage pouch again. "I thought of this method with great difficulty. Don't worry, as long as I don't die, nothing will happen to you." Okay, although Zhen Minghui and the rest were extremely unhappy, who could say anything? Falling into the spirit storage pouch will be treated the same as a spirit beast. At least it was better than falling into the hands of a sword cultivator and dying. However, to put a cultivator into the spirit storage pouch, perhaps only a fierce person like Xiao Hua could think of such a cunning idea. Xiao Hua didn't care about what they thought. After putting the 6 dazed birds into the spirit storage pouch, he waved his hand and put them into the space. He raised his head and looked up, then turned around and flew down. Yuan Qing stood on the scorching sun sword with a trace of excitement on his face. He watched as the sword cultivators formed a group and struck the huge sword shadows into the ground. The dust that soared into the sky earlier could no longer fly high because the black hole that led to the Jinquan Mountain Spirit Stone Mine was already very deep. After waiting for the huge sword shadows to fiercely attack a few more times, Yuan Qing swept his divine sense and waved his hand. "Disciples, take a rest. Conserve your energy. Disciples of the Mad Beast Manor, now that the Jinquan Mountain's defensive array is about to be exposed, release your earth-devouring bugs. Make the final attack. As long as we can take down this spirit stone mine, your Mad Beast Manor will have the greatest merit. At that time, there will be no shortage of spirit stones for you." Yes, this disciple understands. The many disciples of the mad beast manor had excited expressions as they loudly responded. The battle sword flew to Yuan Qing's side and said with a smile, "Disciples, all of you have worked hard for the past few days. Not only have I seen it, the warriors of Sword Region have also remembered it in their hearts. All of your hard work will not be in vain. Just like what Villa Master said before coming here, all of you are the role models of my wild beast villa." Good. This old man won't say any unnecessary words. You all can command the earth-devouring bugs and finish the job in one fell swoop. Yes, the disciples responded, accompanied by the buzzing sounds of insects. In these past few days, the earth-devouring bugs seemed to have grown in size as they flew out from the hands of the disciples. They were like dark clouds that covered the sky as they flew into the black hole. General, Lon Xian's eyes were a bit tired. She looked at the light screen and whispered, "It's time for the disciples to go out. We've been avoiding battle for several days now. The momentum of these cultivators is very weak." Tu Hong had already returned to normal. His eyes shined as he glanced at Lon Xian and asked, "Are the cultivators of the Dao sect still complaining?" You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.